Meeting of the Oregon Water Resources Commission. It's Thursday, August 27th, 2020, and it's 8:30 a.m. This is a video conference. It is also being recorded and live streamed on YouTube, just to let people know that. Just some logistical items. The commissioners have video feed, and staff who are presenting also have video feed, and we're stopping video feed for other participants just because of bandwidth issues, basically. And then participants are also muted unless they are speaking, presenting, or those who are have signed up for public comment. So that's kind of the logistics of the conduct of the meeting. And I think that's everything, and we can just go ahead and get started with the substance. So the first agenda item is commissioner comments. And once again, I'm just looking at the screen, and I'll go in the order in which I see commissioners. And Commissioner Baumgartner, that would make you up first for that.
Thank you, Chair Reeves, although going first isn't necessarily a privilege. I think I just want to note that I know we are all struggling with this COVID time period, and that's been a struggle for everybody. When I read the impact that that's having on the budgets for water resources and my old colleagues at Oregon DEQ, I find it very daunting and somewhat disappointing. I don't think there's anything that we can do about that, but I do think we really need to think as we go ahead about what our priorities are and how to focus on those priorities and make sure that we keep our programs strong and stable over the next couple of years. And with that said, I would just note from our work with water, we've had a pretty good water year this year, which was real fortunate, having water left in the reservoir. And that has really helped reduce the concerns and constraints we have. And I think that's pretty much all I have to note. I do know that many of the national groups that I work on have gone to these video conferences, and I am not sure how that's going to work out for us in the future, but I'm getting a little bit more used to video conferences and the behavior that we have to those. So I hope I don't mess up too much today. With that, that's all I got.
Okay, thank you, Bob. We're all hoping, I think, that we don't mess up too much on this medium. Commissioner Kihara, how about you?
Okay, sure. Make sure I'm unmuted. Okay, cool. Again, I've been kind of stuck in my little COVID bubble, so I have not really been out and about much to see what the world is doing. Concerned with the drought, of course, that seems to be, again and again, we're getting hit with continuing dry weather and excessively drying out the soils. That has me concerned for the future. If we're going to keep going into this cycle, it's just going to get drier and drier. And of course, this year I've been breathing a hell of a lot of smoke from all that nice dried out California, woodlands that are going up in flames. So those are some of my concerns. Again, that's all tied to water, but probably beyond what we can do about it, other than get ready and be prepared for it being something that's just going to be a part of our lives. Also concerned with budgets. I know we've got a lot of skilled and talented people working for the department and across the entire state that, yeah, if it's hitting us, it's hitting everybody, and it's scary. And beyond that, I don't know that I have a lot of comments.
Thank you, Kathy. Commissioner Mall, you're up next. You got some comments?
Good morning, everyone. You can hear me okay?
Up your volume.
Up my volume.
Yeah.
Unlike perhaps Kathy and Bob, I have had a chance to get out. I just took a almost 3-week trip around our region. We have the luxury of a van that allows me to self-contain and travel. So we traveled up the Willamette, up the Columbia, through the Umatilla, across the Snake, up the Lochsaw, up the Bitterroot, up the Clark Fork, down the Madison, down the Henry's Fork, up to the headwaters of the Green. Spent a long time in the backcountry of the Wind Rivers of Wyoming, and came down the Snake through to Ontario. Sorry, I didn't stop, Bruce. Up the John Day, across the Deschutes, up and over the Mackenzie. And besides being stunningly beautiful and inspiring in a lot of ways, it was telling to go through those places that we spend a great deal of time talking about and thinking about, and seeing a couple of things firsthand. Certainly the drought in some areas, and then getting to some of that Walla Walla, Eastern Washington country, stopping at a gas station, and while it was wicked hot and dry and almost harvest time, the local newspaper headline was how this small community was still recovering from their February floods, historic flooding that occurred there. Thought the same thing going through Matilla. And just throughout that travel, just recognizing how many communities are dealing with increasingly wild swings, from wildfire to drought to unprecedented flooding, and the fact that we're going to continue to deal with that in greater frequency and amplitude, and just reinforcing how wicked these problems of water in the West are. And at the end of the day, that just made me really appreciate how lucky we are to have folks in the field, the staff at Water Resources and partner agencies and partner organizations and private landowners who engage in this, because it's tough. The challenges, given the infrastructure that's been developed, the increasing limitations on water availability, the impacts on the rivers and streams that are not what they used to be, just really made me really appreciate how engaged people are doing such good work despite the challenges of it. And just wanted to certainly thank all of the OWRD staff in the field for what they do every day. It's tremendous. Yeah, it's hard not to be together. It's hard not to get out there. I encourage you, even if it's just locally, to spend a little time by your local streams, because it's restorative. No question, it's restorative. Good to see you all again. I look forward to getting together in person as soon as we can. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. Commissioner Corn?
Thank you, Chairperson Reeves. Yeah, I just kind of second what everybody said as far as here in the East, because of good reservoir carryover that we talked about in the past. We've had a very good season. June was cooler than normal, causing less water usage. The crops are winding down and maturing out now, and it looks like going to be very productive here in this part of the state. Harvest season for onions just getting started. It looks like we're going to carry over a reasonable amount of water in our reservoirs for next year, which is always hopeful and helpful for the upcoming 2021 season. We're so dependent upon that, and every bit that we can carry over conservation projects over the last 5 to 10 years continue to bear more and more fruit for our area, as far as drip irrigation, sprinkler irrigation, All those things are just making our reservoir systems work that much better, even though they were built in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s, and it's hard in some cases to adapt to new technology. Nevertheless, this area is adapting far and wide and fairly rapidly to new and more efficient ways of irrigation, causing our reservoirs to be able to utilize the capacities we have to go even further than we have in the past. And so, I, like everyone else, am concerned about what, possibility next year brings. We may see things full and overflowing, and we may see severe drought in the order of 14 and 15. So there's been I think, a mindset change in the last 10 years or so with these recurrent droughts and extended droughts, that rather than maybe irrigate that extra time or whatever, everybody is very cognizant that they need to do all they can to store for next year, because we don't know what's lurking around the corner. And if, we may have a flood type situation like they had in the Umatilla, and, vast quantities have to be evacuated in a short time. But nevertheless, the trend has been that we're doing more with less, or the same with less. And that's because of this underlying threat and need for conservation all the time. And that certainly is happening in our area every year, more and more and more. So the virus is, Malheur County is kind of a hotspot for the virus right now. Part of that is because of the prison we have in our midst, and a lot of the inmates, as well as a significant number of the staff, has had to struggle with that. So that skewed our numbers a little bit here in this area, but nevertheless, schools, as in I think all of Oregon, the kids are having to do it virtually, and that brings a whole set of challenges. And ultimately, it brings a lot of stress to the community in general. I'm sure all of you felt the same thing in the circumstances that you're in. Political unrest and all the things that are going on contributes to stress and people being on edge, and the lack of uncertainty is certainly have an effect upon our society and communities as a whole. So as far as the ag community, there's been a lot of changes to try to, protect against the virus. I mean, the mask thing, you go in packing plants and things like that, they have social distancing, they put up shields, and some places they've had to reduce capacity of their packing facilities just to social distance people out. Right now, as far as demand for products, it's pretty good. Our onion demand has started off really good early in the season. Part of this because the USDA food boxes, and it looks like we have a good crop coming. And again, the key to the whole thing, though, is water. We can grow anything in vast quantities in this area and in many parts of Oregon if we have water. But if you do everything else to perfection in growing a crop and don't have adequate water, or too much water in some cases, if you get a flood, you still have nothing in some cases, because the water is the key ingredient and the key element to our whole food supply and ultimately our existence. So appreciate the opportunity to have to comment, and it's really good to see everybody again. I sure look forward to meeting again, because it's just not the same, but we do the best we can and keep moving forward. So thank you, Chair Reeves.
Thank you, Bruce. I agree with much of what everyone has said, but I was just thinking about seeing people in person. Commissioner Quemps?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hey, thank you, Chair Reeves. I wanted to follow up a little bit on what Commissioner Baumgartner said about prioritizing. I think that, when we're going to have fewer resources, it becomes even more important. I looked through the director's report this morning and some of the topical areas there, whether it's, drought in 14 counties and some of the other issues in the report. And it makes me think back to some of the previous work of the department and of OWEB. Years ago, there was a drought task force that does a great deal of work and had some products that are useful. And then more recently, there was an effort to develop a water vision for Oregon. And unfortunately, that's on hold. But I think that kind of vision would be even more valuable right now in times of uncertainty and budget tightening. To give us consistency, to have captured all of that stakeholder input that was captured, and to use that to help set priorities. And so I think we should keep those kind of tools in mind, and I hope that we can get back to that the state can get back to that water vision and develop it and finish it and use it as a tool to provide greater certainty and to help us prioritize. But in the near term, I think we'll need to continue to prioritize with what we have, and appreciate the work of all the staff. I know it's very stressful to work in this environment and with fewer people and fewer resources. And that's all I have for this morning.
Thank you, Eric. I guess I would just, I was thinking of what all of the commissioners have talked about. Kind of the common theme is that we're in we have a lot of crises happening at the same time. The water conditions this year, climate trends are creating issues, and budgets are a huge issue, of course, and which raises we try to get into and stay in a proactive mode and kind of end up, I think, having to be in a more reactive mode because of our budget situation, our water conditions, and everything else that's happening around us, basically. And I guess I want to echo other people's thoughts that to the extent we can, to try to continue to prioritize some kind of the strategic efforts that we had underway and would like to keep underway. My report from OWEB was really going to be about the formation of a water committee. OWEB's kind of restructuring it relies heavily on a committee structure because there are so many. They have 18. It's a big board with 18 members, and so they use committees. And we were in the process of restructuring the committee setup, and we're adding a water committee, driven really by the 100-year water vision. And so the water committee met since this commission met last, and we talked about the fact that the vision is on hold for budget reasons at the moment, and but the committee, what we'd like to do is still try to figure out what we can do to move things forward, get things ready for when there might be some money available to do more. But also OWEB's kind of thinking about, its likely role is in the natural infrastructure side of the water vision, and trying to think about what, if anything, we ought to be reprioritizing, thinking about differently with that water vision in the background that we know is out there and is going to hopefully have a resurgence to the front of mind after the budget situation changes. So, and I also wanted to echo everybody's thanks to the work that the staff is doing, because it is really hard. Everything about this pandemic is hard, and including budget cuts and inability to work more closely together. And I know we all really appreciate what you're all doing and how you're working through this. So anyway, thank you all for your comments. Let's move to the next agenda item, which is approval of minutes from the June 24th, 2020 meeting. You've all had them for a few days. I figure you have had a chance to review them, and can I get a motion for that? Bob, I think, you
You're
might
muted.
need, yeah, there you go.
Sorry about that.
All right.
I didn't do very well in telling people I actually figured this all out. Whichever I move that we approve the minutes.
Chair Reeves, I
Yes.
second that motion.
All right, we've moved and seconded. Let's do a roll. I'll do a one-by-one roll call. Commissioner Baumgartner,
Yes.
Commissioner Kihara,
Yes.
Commissioner Mall,
Yes.
Commissioner Korn,
Yes.
Commissioner Quimps,
Yes.
all right, and yes from Commissioner Reeves. So minutes are approved. Next item is the director's report. Director Byler, you are up.
Thank you, Chair Reeves, and good morning, commissioners. It's great to see you. And I want to echo that I also would much prefer for us to be together today, but it is our world that we're in. And I actually want to, I really appreciate the comments today around not losing track of our strategic priorities. And I want to maybe riff off of that a little bit because it folds into some of the comments that I wanted to share with you today. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the items in the staff report itself, but I actually have a lot to report out on that are in addition to that. And I want to first start off with on the strategic piece, just as a reminder for folks that the water vision, I couldn't agree more with the comments around the water vision, but just to remind everyone that the water vision is really in most respects an offshoot or a subset of the integrated water resources strategy. So one of the things I'm trying to help our management team and our executive team remember is to the sideboards and goals we've set for ourselves and the framework that the IWRS provides. It's important that we not lose track of that. And I would say in addition to that, our strategic plan that we adopted a while back. And I want to talk about the kind of the three high level objectives of the strategic plan. But before I do that, I want to just reflect on one of the conversations that really stuck with me as we were going through the planning process. And I think I heard this thread in some of the comments from commissioners this morning is one of the big challenges we have. We're not a large agency. We're mid to small, really, 177 FTE compared to, the DEQs, ODFWs, Department of Ag and Forestry are, 500 plus employees. So we're not tiny, but we are limited in terms of our capacity. And so thematically, when we were working on the strategic plan and developing that, one of the big issues that came up was how do we be more strategic and less reactive in terms of what we do, which is a very big challenge when you have a big mission and lots of responsibilities and relatively few staff to carry those out. And so you may recall, we spent a lot of time talking about how do you prioritize when you have all these, many of the mandated responsibilities. But also one of the things that we talked about at the management team level was how do we as managers make sure that we're spending time focused on not just scurrying around reacting to the issue du jour, but also keeping our mind on and focus on staff development, internal development, and organization issues, and focused on our priorities as we go forward. And we recognized at that time that we really need to get better at making sure that we're carving out some time on our plates to focus on those strategic pieces. That's all great stuff. And I couldn't agree more. And I think we are continuing to strive for that. But I'll tell you that COVID just totally knocked that out. It's a great example of how things can come forward and just really take all your good intentions and put them on the side while you grapple with trying to maintain operations under a new environment that we're in. And all that said, we are now practiced in this new operations mode that we're in, and we are trying to bring back elements of the strategic plan and think core values and things that we've been practicing and working on prior to COVID. We're trying to fold those back into the fold. So I wanted you to be aware of that. And this fall really is, I think, where we're going to, I think, have the best opportunity to really start to bring those issues back. In terms of the strategic plan, I want to just offer up the 3 overarching objectives of the plan, because I think those are an important filter for us to be thinking about as we talk about priorities going forward. One is just an oversimplified term, but it's meaningful, I think, at least from my standpoint, and that's modernization. And it's a recognition that we need to modernize programs and practices that we have in our that are part of our responsibility. And there are a lot of different things that we can do within that. And you may remember that we listed a lot of different items. I can tell you that COVID has kind of pushed some to the forefront, as you can imagine, around our information technology services. We've accelerated a lot of work that may not have been our highest priority 8 months ago, but have been an absolute necessity as a result of needing to transition to a remote work environment that we've been in. And so that we've learned a lot in terms of IT. And I think that instruction, we still have a lot of work to do, quite frankly, but I'm recognizing, and we are going to be having lots of conversations about what our operations look like in the future. They're not going to revert back to the pre-COVID status quo. And so what do we want our agency to look like? How do we operate? How do we function? What are our needs, both from an IT standpoint and from an office space standpoint? How do we function in our office space when we can start going back? These are all questions that we're wrestling with. We formed what we call a reopening team that has staff from different sections and divisions of the agency to help inform our thought process. But we are recognizing that we are continuing to transition in this new environment that we're in, and that we need to think outside of the box in terms of how we are going to approach our day-to-day activities, and our basic functions are not going to be the same. They're going to be different, and that is what it is, so to speak. But it is also something that requires a lot of conversation and communication, because it is change, and we've been in a change environment now, radical change environment now for some time. We're getting accustomed to it, but I think that we've got a much longer path ahead of ourselves. So we are working toward that as a management team, and we'll be in communication with you as we navigate that path and have thoughts about what our agency will look like. So modernization is one piece, and I think that COVID again may reorder some of our priorities based on what we're facing right now. Another one that I wanted to mention that of the 3 is kind of a future, or a focus on the future. And that's important for us in terms of thinking about our priorities and our responsibilities, because the work that we do around planning, the data development, making data accessible to communities who are trying to figure out what their water future looks like, the technical expertise that we can bring to bear to help inform those discussions and those thought processes by communities, and the funding that we can provide for planning or technical feasibility studies and projects is critical. And I mention that because one of the things that as I see our agency and I think about how we can serve the public best in the long term, is that when you're in a cuts environment, historically, this agency has been perceived that its core functions have been perceived to be making sure that we have field staff, the water masters distributing water, and that we have folks issuing permits and doing transfers and water rights related work. Our conversations at the management team level have been that's an oversimplified look at what our agency needs to do. And it's actually not helpful for the future for Oregonians for us to think in those terms, because data collection and being able to put data into forms and into information sources that will be useful for our for the water user communities around the state, as well as these future-oriented funding sources are extremely important element of what we need to do to serve communities today in a climate change environment, in a water scarcity environment. So what that means in a budget cuts scenario is that it's harder, frankly, to decide where to make cuts because all of our functions are really fundamental to serving Oregonians' needs around water issues. So I'm just putting that out there because that's a tension that we're grappling with, and I think we'll continue to grapple with for some time. The last thing I'll mention around the strategic plan, the third element is internal improvements. And that is something that we have taken very seriously in terms of understanding that we need to invest in our staff. We need to invest in their training and expertise. We've been recognizing that again, under this COVID transition that we've been in, we've all had a learning curve in terms of moving towards this remote work environment that we're in. And I think some of the ways that we've approached working with our staff are evolving. We're not managing them in the same workspace like we did before. Our managers are having to think differently and operate differently in how we interface with our staff on a regular basis. And I've been very pleased with how we've been transitioning, but I think that this is an area that will demand further attention and practice for us to make sure that we are approaching our operations and our internal improvements appropriately, and that we're adapting to this kind of new workspace that we're in, and providing the kind of work environment that will allow our staff to excel and to find themselves in a work environment that's rewarding for them and effective and productive for the Oregonians that we serve. So there's a lot in there, as you can imagine, and it's exciting to me certainly because I think these are really important fundamental questions for us as an organization and how we go forward. But it's also daunting because we have all these other huge issues coming at us, whether it's the Klamath Basin or other basins that we're working in, drought overall, climate change issues. There's just a lot there, and I appreciate the vision and comments that I'm hearing from commissioners, because you're going to be helpful to us to kind of keep us focused on the horizon, on the goals that we need to be focused on. And I look for future conversations with you as we do more legwork in terms of looking at our operations and our priorities in light of this shifting environment that we're in. One other element that I'll mention that is kind of related to our day-to-day functions and outside of the policy realm, water law policy realm, is that we are placing a real emphasis on diversity and equity and inclusion. And we've heard loud and clear from our staff that is a real need for us as an organization, and I don't disagree with that. We've struggled a little bit to get the wheels in motion with our internal conversations around that, and that's one of the tensions that I think plays out in a lot of things that we do. I've been focused a lot on budget issues over the past couple of months, but we are going to be forming a staff team around those issues. We are going to be taking a very deep and sustained look at how we interface with Oregonians, and we think we have a long history of and it's not inappropriate, but a long history of working with water right holders, which makes sense given that our laws and programs are really built around that. But when you look at our state water laws, it's very clear that water is declared by law as a public resource, and every Oregonian really has an interest in water as a result. And we need to be thinking about how we can kind of broaden our bandwidth in terms of the interface that we have with communities around the state, some of which who have not paid close attention to what we do, but may have an interest in what we do. And we want to be able to find ways to engage with those communities and at a minimum, ask whether they invite them to participate more fully in our work as we go forward. So there's a lot there. It's going to be, again, a long path for us, but we are committed down that path and think that's an important element for us to be working on. I'm going to shift to budget now, and I'm first going to talk about our current budget cycle, which is the 2019-2021 two-year biennial budget. You've seen, I think, some communications that we've had and report outs on budget issues that we've been grappling with over the past few months. The short story is that, again, due to COVID and the economic impacts, particularly of the shutdown that we had in the early months of COVID, had a dramatic impact on the economy, and has had a dramatic impact on state revenues. And we began at the request of the governor, along with other state agencies, to develop potential reduction scenarios in light of the declined revenues. And ultimately, the legislature met a couple of weeks ago in their second special session and did what they have referred to as a rebalance to balance the books, if you will, around the state budget. Overall, they plugged a hole of about $1 billion. And many agencies were impacted, and some of them dramatically. I would say that our impacts were dramatic, but there's some silver lining associated with it. We were cut by about $3.6 million, which is about a 10% reduction, which is a difficult reduction to take more than halfway through the budget cycle. But it does have impacts. There were well over 11 vacant positions that we are not able to restore or fill. So services that would be provided by those staff or those positions we're unable to carry out. It eliminated some discretionary funds that would have been available for grants and other purposes. The good news, the other piece of good news around what happened is that we had anticipated that we would have a layoff associated with that cut, but we were able to avoid that at the 11th hour. So we're excited that we were not having to sustain layoffs of existing staff as a result of that reduction. So that's a big hit. It's a one-time reduction. It won't be carried forward automatically into the next biennium. But it's not the end of the story. As you're well aware, we have continuing concerns about our ability to be able to cover our legal expenses, which has been an issue that has really started to develop around 2011, 2013 biennium. It's grown in its scale. And right now, based on our best estimates, we are looking at about a $860,000 deficit, a shortfall in general fund that based on our projections around our legal expenses going forward. You may recall last biennium, we had the similar issue. We talked to the legislature about it, and they, around this time 2 years ago, the emergency board helped provide some resources to cover that budget hole. We're in conversations with the legislature now. I was hoping that they would cover this issue during the rebalance special session, but they elected not to. Every indication I have at this point is that there is an interest and intent to help us with this issue, but I don't know when that will happen. I'm trying to get some certainty from legislators around this issue to the extent that we can, because if I don't have certainty that this issue will be addressed by the legislature, then it creates a lot of pressure on us to make the adjustments that we would need to administratively. And in light of what I was talking about, that 10% reduction at $3.6 million, we don't have administrative flexibility to take this additional reduction without it impacting currently filled positions. And so we'd like to avoid that. We value our staff greatly. We think they do good work, and we've invested in them, and they are critical for us to be able to carry out a lot of the functions that we have that we're responsible for. And so we're doing everything we can to be able to avoid that impact. And at this point, I'm not here to offer any guarantees, but I am optimistic that that we will be able to work with the legislature successfully to fill that hole. But that's an ongoing issue. I would say that in light that we have a topic on the Klamath today, that based on our last review, over 40% of our legal costs this biennium are on issues related to the Klamath Basin. It's pretty extraordinary statistic and really an indicator of the complexity of the issues in the Klamath Basin with the ongoing adjudication, the litigation that is currently in play and has occurred in recent years. And so it's unfortunate on many levels, but it is kind of an extraordinary gravitational pull on our resources, both from our legal expenses and DOJ expenses, but also for our staff resources. Our staff spend a lot of time on the Klamath Basin, and I'm not just talking about the staff who are located in the Klamath Basin. I'm talking about many individuals in the Salem office who spend a lot of time working on issues in the basin. They're tough issues, and it deserves our attention, but it is difficult because we know that there are a lot of other areas of the state that we need to serve as well. I'm going to shift gears into the new biennium that's approaching. We're tough budget climate going into 21-23. The legislature will convene in early 2021, and all indications are that we may be looking at a slightly less than $4 billion hole in the budget for a general fund. That's a big deal for an agency like ours, where the predominantly our staff and capacity for our day-to-day operations is general fund based. So we're concerned about what that means, and quite honestly, we're expecting cuts budgets going into next biennium. I think everyone is realistic that unless things dramatically change in very unexpected ways, the problems are going to deepen before they get better, and the 2021-2023 biennium is going to be very difficult, and for state as well as the private sector, and that we may be in a period of contraction as a result. The agency recently produced and is currently on our website our agency request budget. The agency request budget is a document that is part of the routine budget development process for state government as an enterprise, and it reflects essentially the kind of the needs and interests and priorities of our agency, both in terms of new asks for resources to help us carry out our functions and programs around the state. But it's not tethered to fiscal reality, which has been kind of the standard practice, that these agency request budgets provide a basis for which ultimately the governor this fall will begin to look at all of the agency request budgets and run them through the governor's filter in terms of the governor's office priorities and also run it through the filter of the latest revenue forecast, which will come out this fall, which will, I assume, provide a significant dampening effect in terms of what resources are available for any kind of new initiatives. It's going to be very difficult to have anything new, any new requests coming into the budget, I think, in the governor's budget. That will all play out in September, October, and by November, the governor will be producing the budget. I think tends to be made public by early December. And then that is then the starting point for discussions with the legislature when they convene in January of 2021. So we'll see how things go going forward, but it's an unfortunate scenario. And again, this all plays into your helpful observations and commissioner comments about how we need to not lose track of our priorities. We may need to rethink our priorities in light of some of the decisions or impacts that our agency might have around budget going forward. But that is what it is, and we need to make sure that we're ready to adapt as we need to. Okay, I'm going to shift now to just a few of the items that are in the report itself. The Walla Walla is it's a great example of another basin. I mentioned the Klamath earlier, but the Walla Walla is another basin that is actually our key other basin where we have cross-border two-state issues. And in this instance, we've been working closely with the Department of Ecology from the state of Washington and the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation on really trying to set the table, if you will, for more holistic solutions within the Walla Walla Basin. It remains to be seen how that will play out, quite honestly, at this point. But we have activities happening on our side of the border as well as on the Washington side. The fact that we're all talking together, I think, is good because we're understanding what each other are doing. And we're hoping that at some point we can get some alignment among those disparate activities that will benefit the long-term water management and needs for that basin. It's going to be a long path, I think. And just an example of how the budget reductions can impact what we are hoping to do and our priorities. In 2019, we were successful in getting funding from the legislature for positions that would help us to accelerate the work that we do around groundwater studies. And the Walla Walla Basin was our first place that we wanted to focus on. And because of budget reductions, we've not filled, I think, 5 out of the 6 positions that were part of that package. In fact, those were part of the reductions that the legislature took in its rebalance work. And it's just it's an example of how, despite our best efforts, sometimes we're not able to make as much progress as we would like. And that's been thematically a conversation in the Walla Walla, where the state of Washington is also grappling with reductions. I think the tribes are also, no one's left unspared with this. And so we're trying to figure out how do we continue to make progress, knowing that we don't have the same level of capacity that we thought we would have. And that's really what it comes down to in the Walla Walla. We are continuing to move forward, but we're not going to be able to move forward as quickly as we had expected. And our ability to be able to interface with the public like we have in the Harney around groundwater issues, is a bit diminished, not only because of the staff capacity that we aren't able to fulfill because of the rebalance reductions, but also because of COVID-19 and the fact that we aren't able to convene people in the same room like we would, like we did in Harney, and start to build those relationships. So really new challenges that we have across the board, both in terms of our limited capacity and our the different means by which we communicate with folks. So we're going to be blazing a bit of a new trail there. In terms of water supply, I don't have much to report out other than 14 counties have declared drought emergencies. it's I would say this is not a good year with respect to drought, but we've seen worse years than this. I continue to hear reports now and then from staff where we're regulating senior users who are not accustomed to being regulated. And I think that is a reflection on what we may be experiencing in the future with respect to climate change and more extreme temperatures and the impacts that's having on the water user community. And it may be a signal for senior users to really be thinking about their water supply and what they have, and whether they have the redundancy that they need in light of the fact that they may not be able to rely on their current water rights in the ways that they have in the past. And you know, it's unfortunate to see these senior users get caught by surprise, and they really, when that happens mid-season, there's really not a whole lot they can do to address their issues. So it's a tough situation, but I do think it's one that, again, where we need to be helping individual users and water user communities really be thinking about their future and what Oregon is going to look like with respect to water going forward, and put them on a path to help them meet their needs in the long term. With respect to climate change, that continues to be a big driver of what we do and how we think about our work, and it affects us on a day-to-day basis, both in terms of extreme events and when we think about dam safety issues, but also in terms of our, these hot and dry summers or reduced snowpack, and how that affects communities. It has a dramatic impact on our workload, depending on how bad the year is. In the staff report, there's a reference to the climate adaptation framework. There was a climate adaptation framework that the Department of Land Conservation and Development spearheaded along with partner agencies at the state level 10 years ago, 2010. And we've been in a process to update that framework. And a draft, I think, is due out soon, if it's not already out. And there is an expectation that a final will be of that framework of the update will be available by December of this year. It is the goal of the framework is to really help the state kind of align its kind of implementation priorities so that we're looking through a similar lens, and also provide a vehicle for us to partner better with tribes, with local governments and other community partners around the state. So that is going to continue to be an element that we are going to be thinking about and talking about as we go forward. I think the last item I'll mention is the Deschutes Basin Groundwater Mitigation Program 2019 annual review. The report is attached to the staff report. Sarah Henderson did a great job pulling that together. We are required to provide these reports on the progress and kind of the latest updates around status updates, I guess, really around the Deschutes mitigation program. For many of you have seen these reports in the past. The short story is that I guess to oversimplify and summarize, is that it's as steady as she goes. We are in the process. It's notable that of a 5-year report that's required by the legislature. We do a lot of reporting within this program. And we are going to be starting to work with stakeholders around the development of the 5-year report, which I think we have to report out to the legislature by the end of next calendar year, 2021. All that said, we are still within the cap that the mitigation program provides. And I'm sorry, I probably should have said at the outset that the purpose of the mitigation program is based on the study from years ago that determined that surface water and groundwater are hydraulically connected at a very significant degree. and that while surface water is fully appropriated in the basin, new groundwater appropriations need to find mitigation for their impacts to surface water flows. So this whole mitigation program is built around that concept. And we've heard in the past from particularly the municipalities in Central Oregon that there's a desire for us to take a fresh look at how this program is managed going into the future. And we remain interested in that conversation. And I think that perhaps this 5-year report may be a good springboard for some of those conversations to follow. So with that, I think I'll close my remarks because my throat's getting really dry at this point, and see if there are any questions.
Do commissioners have questions for Tom?
Chair Reeves.
Yes. Eric.
Well, this is Bruce actually.
Sorry, Bruce.
Is Eric on? That's okay.
No, I just heard a voice. I thought it was Eric, but it's you.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sorry. I was just wondering, on programs we're trying to wrap up, the Harney really comes to forefront for me. Do you think you're going to be able to help those folks finish with the work that's just almost there, that's desperately needed, or is that even going to have to be cut back in the climate we're in?
Commissioner Corn, Chair Reeves, that's a great question. And I do think that the groundwater study will get completed. It may get delayed a little bit. I'm not sure what time frame it's on right now. We had expected that it would be completed final form by the end of this calendar year. That may shift a little bit. But there's a lot that we want to do and that they want to do going forward. And I do think that the economic problems that we're having and its impacts on revenues for the state and frankly for the federal government really are big challenges when you have an initiative and a project, this collective work that's been going on. We need to move on those items, and the community can't wait for actions to occur. But some of the actions may require resources, and in fact, I know some of the actions will require additional resources, and so it's really going to be a challenge to be able to find the resources needed to help sustain some of the emerging solutions that may come out of that basin. We're committed to continue to work in partnership with that community. I remain hopeful and optimistic that we can navigate a path that will help the community. But I do think this economic environment is going to make it tougher to find the resources to act on some of the ideas that are being generated out in the community.
Thank you. Parallel to not only the groundwater study is their place-based planning, which really has been an integral part of what they're doing. And they're, getting ready to kind of do their final steps on all that. Are we going to be able to continue to support that, or is that going to have to be curtailed too?
Commissioner Corn, that's a good question. We've been able to avoid reductions to the funds that were appropriated for place-based planning for the 4 groups. We did not recommend reductions in that area, and the legislature did not take it. I would also note that before the special session, the second special session that I was referring to earlier, the tri-chairs, the 2 state senators and the 1 state representative who chair the budget committee, have a lot of influence over how budget decisions are made, specifically referred to place-based planning as a priority area. And so I thought that was very heartening to me to see that the legislature was recognizing that these investments that we're making with these communities are to help them develop their plan for their water future is an important investment. So in the near term, they'll have their funding that they were appropriated in 2019 for the remainder of the biennium. Whether they need continuing resources through the budget processes in 2021 is a whole nother question in terms of how competitive and or what resources might be available in that environment.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair Reeves.
Any other commissioners with questions for Tom?
Yeah, Jerry,
Yes,
Joe
Joe.
Mall here.
Mhm.
Thanks, Tom, for the update. Same goes for you and all the staff in Salem. Appreciate what you all are doing. As much a question as a comment, maybe a suggestion. Chair Reeves, your description of OWEB's new water subcommittee, and with that in light then of the comment letters that we got on the Deschutes mitigation program from both ODFW and DEQ, pretty strong encouragement, and I think that goes back to the 2016 report on that 5-year report to really convene stakeholder groups to re-examine some of those assumptions. It was concerning to me to see the force with which concerns, for example, about impacts of groundwater withdrawal on springs and the direct connection potentially to something that through our grants program we are pretty strongly supporting, which is piping traditional irrigation water, and how that could have unforeseen negative consequences on cold water upwellings and other things like that. And so I wonder, Chair Reeves, if perhaps that OWEB subcommittee might be a mechanism by which maybe the commissions and boards of DEQ, ODFW, and ODFRD might be able to get together and at least hear some of the same descriptions and issues at the same time, and share some ideas on that. So to Tom's point about the integrated water resources strategy, I think it would be a step in us being able to do things rather than having to respond to individual staff reports at individual commission meetings. And I understand all the challenges of COVID and such aside, I think if we could anticipate that, if my understanding is the next 5-year report is to be complete at the end of 2021, perhaps if we got the ball rolling on that, some of that stuff now, maybe by next spring or summer, we actually could get together for a water summit of the different agency boards and commissions around those topics, because they're of great concern, especially as when we're looking again, even at this round, at more funding for big projects that with good intention look to conserve water by getting it out of old ditches and putting it into pipes. Well, maybe that's for the entire system, especially the natural flows. Maybe that's got some unintended consequences. So an example of the kind of thing that I would like to see us follow up on if we can. Thanks.
I think that's I don't know. I don't know about the logistics and when we might be able to do that, but I do think it's a good idea to kind of bring some interdisciplinary conversation to this issue that you're talking about. I don't know if it would be just in the Deschutes or more of a statewide water vision issue, but Tom, what are your thoughts about that?
I think that the concept is sound from the standpoint that I see this within the natural resources agencies, for example. Twice a month the directors meet together in our natural resources cabinet. We have a group now that of kind of deputy level participants who meet frequently in what we call a water core team. And they initially were helping us with the water vision, but really their initial charge was to help problem solve around water issues broadly, recognizing that you've got these different elements. You've got the water quality, you've got water quantity, you've got all species issues associated with this. There are a lot of different programs and agencies that have a stake in that, and creating a forum where they can communicate and problem solve and partner better is valuable. I think that also plays to Commissioner Mall's observation. That also, to me, suggests there's value in having commission and board communication similarly, right? Where you can kind of make sure that you're understanding the bigger picture and how the different pieces fit together. There are different ways you can approach doing that. I would remind, well, I guess some of you, but this may predate some commissioners, in previous years, there was an attempt to invite commissioners from other boards and commissions to sit in on our commission meetings. We had a member of the EQC, the Environmental Quality Commission, for example, who regularly attended our commission meetings. And our former commission member, Jeannie Lejeune, would go to the EQC meetings, and they would report out on what was happening, what they were observing in these meetings to their respective boards and commissions. That's another model. I don't know what the right model is, but what I can do is maybe bring this issue up in the context of our directors' meetings. And maybe also in light of this, maybe more of just the water issues, and let folks know that there's some interest from the Water Resources Commission in creating some kind of vehicle for to interface.
Tom, we lost Tom. At least I lost your. Can't hear you. Can other commissioners hear? Okay.
We lost your audio.
Huh.
Oh, you're back again now.
Yeah.
There you are.
Sorry.
About that. I'm not sure where I left off. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Bottom line is that I'm sorry. I really have no idea where I left off on that, and I don't want to rehash it all. I would be happy to bring this issue to a cabinet discussion and maybe focusing on the water-related agencies to see if there's interest in exploring some kind of forum that we could create where these commissions could engage periodically to kind of better understand how there are different issues intersect. Would that be of interest? Or Commissioner Mall, I'm not sure if you were specifically wanting to drive this towards the Deschutes as a specific topic, or are you thinking something more general and longer standing?
Thanks. And I got a note from Nirvana that I was difficult to hear. I just adjusted my mic. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. I think the specificity of having some a track record now, some data to work with in the Deschutes makes it helpful to gather around it particularly, but just because it's I find it more productive to do that kind of work with something specific, but not limit it necessarily to the Deschutes. So it becomes a test case. I think I think one of the challenges of 100-year water vision to date has been that it's so big and it's such a long time frame that people don't know where to start. Whereas here's a particular program that's due to sunset in 2029. We've got data now. There has been a lot of investment, and so we do well to look at it and learn from it, to then roll out those things to part of the state. So I know that asking for something like this at a time of limited resources is a little foolhardy, but again, thinking ahead to the coming years. I forgot there was one other thing I did want to mention within this. I just saw that in early August, FEMA announced a new $500 million grant program that is around community resilient. It's the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities Program, BRIC. And it's something that's got specific set-asides for states, for tribes, and then a big national pot. And it includes some capacity building money. So I would hope that the state is plugging into that because it's exactly the kind of federal money that I think could help with some of these limitations and help us convene some of these things, whether at a staff only level or more broadly.
Commissioner Mall, we are tracking that program, that new program, and with interest, and we'll try to take advantage of it if we can. If I may, just to kind of close this item, I hear you, Commissioner Mall. I will raise this question with the directors and see if there's some interest in pulling something together. What comes to mind for me, and we'll see where the conversation goes, but it almost might be worthwhile to, if there's a subcommittee of commission members from different boards and commissions.
Tom, your sound now and then it goes crazy and then you cut out. I'm not sure what's happening there. It's like super loud and then you cut out.
Sorry.
No, we can hear you like super loud and distorted, kind of. I don't know what's going on there.
Well,
Nirvana? Go ahead, Tom. You sounded normal for a second there.
yeah, I think I'll just say I'll get back to you guys on this.
Quit hitting the distortion pedal on your guitar.
Right, exactly. All right.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Tom. And okay, so it's time for us to move on to the next agenda item, which is the delegation of authority to implement the provisions of ORS 540.220 and OAR 690-250-0160 in the Klamath Basin. And we have Ivan and Tom Paul and Renee. If you guys want to come on and introduce yourselves and get going.
Good morning, Chair Reeves and members of the commission. Can everybody hear me okay? For the record, this is Ivan Gall, Division Administrator for the Field Services Division.
This is Tom Paul, Special Assistant to Director Byler. I'm really here, and I did turn my video on, so I think that Nirvana has toggled me off on video, which is just fine.
I've not toggled you off on video, Tom. I can't start your video for you. You'll have to start it on your own. I can ask you to unmute, and but can't start your video.
Yeah, I'm showing my video is on, so.
Renee, are you able to start your video?
Yes, I am. Good morning. This is Renee Moulin from the Oregon Department of Justice on behalf of the Water Resources Department.
Great. So Chair Reeves, members of the commission, this morning I'll be providing a brief background on this matter. I'll also provide you with an update on the work that we've done to date, and then we'll be requesting that the commission delegate authority to the director to require water users to pay in advance the estimated compensation and expenses of the assistants involved in the distribution or division of water pursuant to ORS 540.210. I will remind us all that the department is in active litigation with Klamath Irrigation District over this matter and around the issue of stored water in the Upper Klamath Basin. And so some of the questions you may have, we may not be able to answer. Nirvana, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. I've got some slides, just a handful of them to go through.
We can see your screen, Ivan. Can everyone see the screen?
Great. So if there's any questions, please stop me during the presentation here, but I'll make sure we have plenty of time at the end to answer questions there. So kind of for quick orientation here, I've got a couple of slides. This is zoomed out quite a bit, but I'll point you to the location of Upper Klamath Lake here, kind of in the lower central portion of the slide, and have you note the inflows of the Wood River into Agency Lake and then into Upper Klamath Lake, and then the larger Williamson River system that's also fed by the Sprague River system as well. Here's a location of the city of Klamath Falls. We'll be talking this morning about points of diversion around Upper Klamath Lake, and then also below Link River Dam. So Link River Dam is located down here at the southern tip of Upper Klamath Lake, and water released through Link River Dam then goes into the Klamath River on its way down to the Oregon-California border here. This is slightly zoomed in onto the same slide on the left there. And then I've also got an aerial photograph, which I always find kind of fun to look at, on the right-hand side of the screen as well. Again, the city of Klamath Falls, Link River Dam will be down located in this location here, and then the Klamath River heading off to the south-southwest there. Item 3 of the staff report provides a short summary of the dispute to date between KID and BOR since 2018, and the court actions by KID to compel the department to take charge of Upper Klamath Lake under ORS 54210. I use KID here for the Klamath Irrigation District. We were in front of you this year earlier on April 24th, requesting delegation of investigatory authority, which you did grant to the director. At that time, we indicated we could return for updates, and if needed, we may need to request payment in advance for compensation and expense of assistance. The Klamath Irrigation District's request for the department to take charge of Upper Klamath Reservoir. It's a very large and complicated hydrologic system under 54210, involves a substantial commitment by department staff, both in time and resources, in order to perform that investigation in a timely fashion. It's a very complicated hydrologic system. As I pointed out, the lake has multiple rivers flowing into it. What's not shown on this map are multiple springs. There's a significant amount of groundwater discharge. It's been estimated as much as 300 cubic feet per second. There's also significant rates of evaporation from Upper Klamath Lake. Because of its large surface area, hundreds of CFS can be evaporated off of the surface of that lake during the summer months. And there are also multiple diversions around, around Upper Klamath Lake. The largest of which is the A Canal, which is a major project diversion there just above Link River Dam. But there's about 30 other points of diversion that are scattered around Upper Klamath Lake, and we'll talk more about those shortly. The historical approach to estimating the available water supply from Upper Klamath Lake for the BOR project relies heavily on changes in lake level. So they use a water balance or water budget approach. And that's worked for many decades, but that approach does not directly measure all of the variables like the direct diversions from the lake. So some of the work that we've done recently, the department issued subpoenas to KID, the Bureau, and PacifiCorp in early May to gather more information. Those parties quickly responded to the extent that the information was available. The department also sent requests for information to water users around Upper Klamath Lake and below Link River Dam on the river. There's approximately 85 points of diversion in Oregon that divert water from the Klamath River below Link River Dam there. The department has limited site-specific data for those points of diversion around the lake and below Link River Dam. We got responses back from those water users. Some of those indicated they didn't know how much water they were diverting. They didn't know whether they were diverting live flow. And I'm going to use terms of live flow, natural flow, or stream flow interchangeably here. Again, in Oregon, we look at surface water rights either being from a stream, which we would consider live flow or stream flow, versus a stored water component. Upper Klamath Lake is a natural system with rivers flowing into it. So there's some water rights that have a live flow, including the project's KA1000 determined claim. That KA1000 claim is also entitled to divert stored water, which is stored under a different determined claim that the Bureau of Reclamation holds. Talk a little bit about the Klamath Water Master Office here. That's currently the largest water master office in the state of Oregon. We have 4 state-funded positions there and there's a county-funded full-time assistant there as well. So we have a total of 5 staff in that office. These 5 staff, despite their best intentions, cannot keep up with the current daily workload. Their workload involves a tremendous amount of regulation and distribution that now dates back to 2013 when the order of determination was delivered to the circuit court. So our staff have been learning and regulating in the upper basin on the Wood River system, the Williamson and the Sprague River system over the last 7 years there. Staff are also responsible for operation and maintenance of gauging stations. They measure groundwater levels in wells in and around the project area and in other parts of the basin, and they're also responsible for dam safety inspections. They do not have the capacity as currently staffed in that office to take on the investigation to aid in this dispute between KID and the Bureau in as quick a fashion as KID would like them to do. And so really what we're here today to talk about is additional staff coming into the basin to speed up the process of aiding in that investigation and gathering the critical information that we need to do. Next slide here, we've zoomed into Upper Klamath Lake a little bit closer now. Based on our water right records, we estimate there's about 30 points of diversion around Upper Klamath Lake. The next phase of the investigation is going to involve site visits to these PODs, both around the lake and below Link River Dam. That information is important because these PODs around the lake, and this does not include the A canal, they have a total diversion rate of about 231 cubic feet per second. So that's a significant amount of water that needs to be accounted for when we're trying to determine the water budget for the lake and whether live flow or stored water is being diverted by these folks. The Bureau of Reclamation does not measure or monitor these diversions with the exception of the A canal there. It's important for the water master to have an accurate sum of the diversions from the lake in order to calculate the stored water component of the water budget, as this is in dispute between KID and BOR. This slide shows the location of those PODs. Some of these dots you'll see are essentially lying on top of others. One point of diversion can actually serve multiple water rights. The different colors here represent the nature of the water rights themselves. So on my screen, what shows up is pink are points of diversion that are listed on the determined claim KA1000. So that's important because those points of diversion are entitled to divert both live flow or natural flow and have access to that stored water component there as well. Other determined claims are in kind of the dark purple color. And then the gold color there, or yellow, are certificated water rights with PODs around Upper Klamath Lake. So those were not part of the adjudication process there. So we're going to move a little bit south from Upper Klamath Lake. You can see the southern tip of Upper Klamath Lake is in the upper part of this slide here. What we're looking at now are the numerous points of diversion below Link River Dam that divert water from the Klamath River itself. This is the same color convention that we used on the previous slide. So the KA1000 claims, points of diversion that are tied to determined claim KA1000 are in that pink color. And you can see they're scattered over a fairly large reach of the river there. Again, those determined claims have access to both live flow and in this case, it would be releases of stored water from Upper Klamath Lake. At this time, our staff in the basin are not clear on the nature, the size, or the infrastructure of the points of diversion around the lake or below Link River Dam. The assistants brought in to work on this project will be setting up times to meet with the water users who own or control these PODs. They'll set up times to come down and do tours for the diversion works there, and make sure that we have the correct water right information and determine claim information correlated to each POD, as well as gather current ownership and contact information for the owners or operators of this. A number of comments have been submitted to the commission for this agenda item just over the last couple of days that do focus on the installation of measuring devices. To be clear, we're not asking the commission to delegate authority for measuring device installation, nor to charge water users for measuring devices. The department has clear authority to require measuring devices both in statute and rule. If measuring devices are not installed or functional at these points of diversion, department staff will be available to help water users understand the type of measuring device that would work best specific to each diversion. Where diversions are pump systems, measuring devices are likely going to be totalizing flow meters. These cost on the order of a couple $1,000s to be purchased and installed. For small ditches, weirs or submerged orifice measuring devices are good options, and those also cost on the order of several $1,000s. For large ditches and canals, the cost of measuring devices can range between $10,000 to up to as much as $30,000. Our agency currently has about $80,000 available to help cost share fund the installation of measuring devices. Tom Paul and I spoke with the Bureau of Reclamation earlier this week. They're looking for dollars as well to help install measuring devices as well. Their Water Smart program has been used in the past to fund similar type measuring device installations for programs in Oregon and other parts of the country there. Going back to the staff report, attachment 1 provides an initial estimate of our potential compensation and expenses of the work conducted to date and needed to proceed with the investigation through the next phase of assessing the points of diversion around the lake and below Link River Dam in aid of creating a distribution list for water management. The sum at the bottom of the table did not include the total for the work conducted to date. That was an error on my part. This correct sum should be $52,273, but this is intended to provide an example of the estimated costs and is not intended to be all inclusive and may be subject to revision. Again, the delegation today is just about the cost of the investigation. It is not a delegation about costs of measuring devices or requiring measuring devices. For the water master to understand and quantify the water uses from Upper Klamath Lake and the river below Link River Dam, and possibly to regulate releases of water from the lake, the department needs the best available data to make defensible decisions. So at this point, I'll stop and be happy to answer any questions and also check with Tom and Renee to see if they'd like to add anything.
Yeah, this is Tom. Ivan, you did a good job of explaining it. Just again, to be clear, in the event measuring devices and head gates are needed, the water master does have authority under statute to move forward, and we would not be returning to the commission on that particular issue.
So I can't, because we're sharing the screen, I can't see other, thank you. Do other commissioners have questions for Ivan or Tom or any of the presenters?
Madam Chairman?
Yes, Bruce.
Am I clear? Is there a measuring device at the Link River Dam or whatever it was right now? And do you have data from that measuring device, or is there no measuring device there?
Chair Reeves, Commissioner Korn, there is a measuring device that measures releases from Link River Dam. I'm not quite sure who, I think the Bureau works with the U.S. Geological Survey on that one. There's also a measuring device on the A Canal, which is the large project diversion from Upper Klamath Lake. And, those are both available sources of information online and are widely shared by BOR there. So those handle the largest diversion from Upper Klamath Lake and the releases of water from the lake down the river. But they don't provide any information on the other multiple diversions around Upper Klamath Lake itself, nor how much of the water that's released downriver is being diverted by the multiple PODs down there.
Is there any diversion device at the end of that slide where you showed where after all the diversions that happened to quantify somewhat what the diversion has been?
There are multiple measuring points, if you will, down the Klamath River. Below some of those points of diversion is a location called Keno Dam, and there's a gauge there as well. And then I know flows over Iron Gate Dam, or releases through Iron Gate Dam are also measured.
So you at least have a way to know the, I guess, not just the diversion, but the total difference between what you started with at the top and what you end up with at the bottom.
There is an opportunity to make that assessment, but it's further complicated by the fact that at some points there's additional groundwater inflow to the Klamath River there, and I'm not familiar with those exact locations or quantities.
But is the issue not that the stream flow and maintaining stream flow, is that not really the issue on this whole thing?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, minimum flows for the fish and all that. I mean, that's kind of where this dispute all comes in, isn't it? And you do have somewhat of a handle on where you're at on what the minimum stream flow is as opposed to what is actually happened after the diversions.
Chair Reeves, Commissioner Court, you are correct. There is water in the Klamath River that's being released for biological opinion flows to maintain that for the endangered species down the river.
Do we have other questions for Ivan or Tom or Renee?
Chair Reeves, if this is Tom Paul, and if I might add a little.
Sure.
Part of the problem we have is, Commissioner Corn, you asked if there was a measuring device at Link River, and yes, there is, but the Bureau has never tracked the difference between stored water and natural stream flow. The water going into A Canal is water. The water going into the diversions below Link River Dam is water, and what we're having to do, since the direction is to track stored water, we're having to determine how much water at Link River Dam is stored and how much of it is natural flow. And that's really quite a challenge to sort that out. And that's why we need the defensible information from those who are diverting, as well as tracking how much water the Bureau has stored under their determined claim, and try to sort out then how much stored water is passing Link River Dam. And it's not an easy answer.
Do you consider the groundwater stored water or just what's in Klamath Lake from the rivers that are contributing?
The groundwater would be considered as natural flow, part of the stream flow, because it has been occurring there. It does aid in filling the reservoir during the fill period, but that's counted as the natural flow.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tom and Ivan. Do we have other questions from other commissioners?
I just had one question, and I was wondering how long is it going to take to get this network installed and developed so that you can create the defensible data that you're looking for?
Chair Reeves, Commissioner Baumgartner, it's a good question. We have not personally visited the vast majority of these points of diversion around the lake or below Link River Dam there. That's part of the reason that we're if you will, behind on understanding this system. We've not been called upon to regulate in this part of the basin before. And so the information that we need will come out of those various site visits. We're not really in a position to understand right now what condition these points of diversion are in. We did get responses back from a number of the water users down there, but the bulk seemed to indicate that measuring devices were not present. Some provided photographs of the systems, but it's really hard to make that assessment without getting out there on the ground. What we'll be doing is looking for available resources as soon as we can to get them down there to do this work. I suspect it's a couple months on the ground to visit the various points of diversion and start the process.
Thanks, Ivan.
Any other questions? Okay, it does not look like we have other questions. We do have public comment on this agenda item. I would like to ask Marianne Cooper to present, and I'm just going to say that I'd like to try to keep comments to about 5 minutes, please.
Absolutely. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to comment today. And we did submit a letter, so I will definitely keep my comments at under 5 minutes. So for the record, I'm Marianne Cooper. I'm the Vice President of Public Policy for the Oregon Farm Bureau. And we are coming on agenda item D that we just heard about from Ivan and Tom. Thank you. And we have had conversations with both Ivan and Tom about this predating our comments. So with that, I think the very base of our comments stems from that we do understand the point that Ivan and Tom made around the delegation of authority is just looking at recouping costs associated with the court's order for administering the water rights around Upper Klamath Lake and recouping those costs from Klamath Irrigation District. That said, the work outlined in the staff report would impose very, very real and significant costs on water users around and below Upper Klamath Lake. And those 115 water users, many of whom are our members, do not appear to be aware that the imposition of measuring devices and the work that is proposed by the department in this order is coming down. And so with that, we understand that the department didn't ask for or invite this order, but the department does need to accept responsibility for how they respond to it. And in a time of extreme budget shortfall, we know that cost share measurement dollars just got cut, that the OWEB program is likely not going to be available to the extent that it was historically because of record low lottery revenue. And so we're coupling that with record low commodity prices, markets disrupted due to the pandemic, and just really, really severe impacts to the agricultural economy already. Most of these small family farms are not going to have the resources to install and maintain these measuring devices. And on top of that, these systems are incredibly complex, and in some cases, installation of measuring devices would either be incredibly cost prohibitive or impossible. So with that, we really want to encourage the department to slow down, take a step back, engage more closely with the impacted water users who are not Klamath Irrigation District, provide them notice and an opportunity to engage with the department, ensure that they're not asking for measuring devices until there are cost share resources dollars available for the installation of those, and ensuring that the data is actually necessary for the administration of water rights before they ask for the installation of those measuring devices. And I guess, I'd say we, and I was out on leave, I think when the orders first came in April, but our folks got the request for information, but they had no idea that the installation of measuring devices was a potential next step in this process. And again, we understand that the commission, or that the department's not seeking authority from the commission for those measuring devices. That said, we do think the commission has an obligation and the department has an obligation to those users to be a little more transparent, a little more collaborative, and solicit better feedback and ensure that there are cost share dollars available, because these are users that really, are close to going out of business and cannot afford another requirement in the middle of a pandemic. And so we, again, we understand this isn't something the department invited or that they're seeking permission from the commission to do. That said, we do think it's an obligation on both the part of the department and the commission to ensure better transparency, better communication, and better engagement with these impacted water users than we have seen to date. So with that, I will close, and I'm happy to take any questions, and thank you for the opportunity to comment.
And thank you for coming to talk to us, Ms. Cooper. We appreciate it. Do we have any commissioners have questions?
Is it okay to ask questions where this is potential litigation? I guess I'd ask Renee that first of all.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Corr and Chair Reeves. I appreciate that heads up. We are actually in the midst of litigation, and the substance of the litigation is actually very relevant to the substance of the comments that you're receiving this morning. We even have a hearing this morning right after the commission meeting. So I would caution you that it's not a good idea to comment substantively on matters that are pending in litigation. And so to the extent that you have questions, I would ask you to not opine on the merit of the comments that are presented or the arguments that are presented, but if you have specific factual questions, those are appropriately asked.
Okay, so I do have one. Is the diversion in the A Canal you talked about, is that the only diversion that's part of the Klamath Irrigation District, or are all these diversions we've seen down the river part of the Klamath Irrigation District?
Chair Reeves, members of the commission, the A Canal serves multiple irrigation districts, including the Klamath Irrigation District. There are some other large project diversions like the North Canal and 80 Canal that divert from the river below Link River Dam. Frankly, I don't understand enough about the system down there to know how many of the points of diversion below Link River Dam are capable of providing water to KID lands or other irrigation district lands. There's a number of districts down there like the Klamath Drainage District. Also, U.S. Fish and Wildlife has the refuge down there as well.
But KID is the only one we're focused on for this matter, right?
KID,
No.
is the district that's bringing the litigation and compelling the
Okay.
to do the work.
And they're the ones that invited us to be part of this allocation and diversion.
I'm not sure I follow your question.
Well, I guess I'm wondering, is there a bunch of people along here that's diverting that are not part of KID that this measuring device issue would be imposed on?
Chair Reeves, members of the commission, there are a number of points of diversion both around the lake and below the river that will have nothing to do with the Klamath Irrigation.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. Sounds like I'm getting in the gray area there, so sorry, Renee.
No, for the record, this is Renee Mulan and Commissioner Corr. I just wanted to point out that the statute that KID is using to request the department to allocate water is ORS 54210, and that statute directs that the department distribute water from the reservoir at issue according to the respective and relative rights of all users that take water from that reservoir. So that's why everyone is brought into this.
Thank you.
And
Bob, did you have a question?
yes, I did. Thank you, Chair Reeves. And Renee, I think my first question is for you, and I was wondering if it's appropriate for me to ask Mary Ann what her vision is for improved communication and transparency for the department down there.
Thank you. For the record, this is Renee Mulan, Chair Reeves, Commissioner Baumgartner. I think that's an appropriate question.
Mary Ann, did you hear the question?
I did. Thank you, Commissioner Baumgartner. So we spent quite a bit of time earlier this week on the phone with Tom Paul, and I think outlined what our hopes would be is one, prior to any measuring device orders, prior to anything that feels kind of official or regulatory from the department, that they come down and seek to chat with folks one-on-one, go out and see what their diversions are, hear what their concerns would be around challenges in selling measuring devices, whether it's purely cost or cost and logistics or cost, logistics, and timing. and try to work with them on that. Second is, and we offered to help with this effort or lead the effort, anticipate how much will be needed in cost share measurement dollars and try to get that from the department, even in a budget shortfall, or from the legislature, even in a budget shortfall. We've had pretty good advocates in the legislature down in Klamath that have been effective at getting resources when needed to resolve some of the water issues down there. So I don't think that would be a huge fool's errand, but I think there will be a shortfall, given I think the number I heard was 80,000 left in that account. And I know the remainder was recently defunded. And you know, some of these devices could be upwards of 30,000. We've got 115 users at minimum that are being targeted with the need for measuring devices. But I think for us, the biggest first step is, you know, let folks know that this is something that is on the horizon. Go talk to them, hear their concerns, engage with the community. Our local Farm Bureau has offered to help with that in whatever way they can. And we have, again, several of these users are on our Farm Bureau board and are directly impacted. So that I don't, hopefully that was a clear enough vision, but you know, I think increased communication prior to regulation, ensuring that there are cost share dollars available, and working with folks to make sure that this isn't imposing an undue burden in the middle of a pandemic.
Thank you, Marianne.
Thank you. Our next commenter is Jean Souza, who's here on behalf of the Klamath Irrigation District.
Good morning, Chair Reeves, Commissioners Baumgartner, Corn, Chiara, Kemps, Mole, and Director Byler. My name is Jean Souza. I'm the Executive Director and District Manager for the Klamath Irrigation District. In this capacity, I've had no invitations to date for conversations with either Ivan or Tom. And for the record, my council has submitted a letter for the Commission for your review. I'd like to address Director Byler's comments to the Commission regarding this letter. First off, for the past 3 decades of record, there's conflict here in the Klamath Basin. Time and time again, water right holders have been deprived of their property. As our state, from my observation, despite Director's previous comments and Ivan's comments here, this department has turned a blind eye. Since at least 2014, Oregon Water Resource Department has had in its possession the adjudicated water rights issued by Oregon Water Resource Department's own adjudicator in the Klamath Basin adjudication after 38 years of careful analysis. This is a legal document providing the foundation for our society. From reviewing Director Byler's memorandum for the Commission, I read the document in front of you and Mr. Gall's comments this morning that for the past 6 years, this department has sat on its hands, has failed to educate itself on the consequences of its own agency's determination and adjudication, and has failed to coordinate with the water right holders to identify challenges for this department required by the ruling. The department continues to use delay tactics to avoid performing their lawful duties to prevent unlawful release of stored water. In the military, we call this failing to plan is planning to fail. Director Byler also complains continuously, as he did this morning, in multiple forums about budget issues related to the Klamath Basin and resulting litigation. From my foxhole, the litigation costs here in Klamath are a direct result in a loss of trust from the people of the Klamath Basin in our government agencies when our government fails to uphold the law. The loss of trust is objectively merited as the courts are consistently finding on issues ranging from groundwater regulation to surface water distribution from Upper Klamath Lake that Oregon Water Resource Department is acting unlawfully toward farmers and ranchers here in the Klamath Basin. When an agency is constantly being sued by farmers and ranchers on an array of issues, and the courts are consistently ruling that the agency is failing to follow the law and violating the farmers and ranchers' rights, that should be a clear sign to the Commission that something is very wrong and that the approach and alignment here in the Klamath Basin needs to fundamentally change. I'm going to add some facts that were not listed in Director Byler's memorandum. First, upon our request in April, Oregon Water Resource Department failed to prevent unlawful distributions from stored water from occurring despite having clear information and intent of the unlawful distribution provided directly by reclamation. Director Byler's current request for funding to measure the unlawful releases is nearly 5 months too late. Klamath Irrigation District provides a backbone in the delivery system for the KA 1000 water right of water stored from Upper Klamath Lake, meaning I'm under contract to deliver the KA 1000 property from the stored water to 8 other irrigation districts, in addition to hundreds of other individual water right holders. In May of this year, the Klamath Irrigation District had to discontinue the KA 1000 water property deliveries to over 26,000 acres, 6 districts, and severely impaired the district from performing its contractual obligation to over 3,200 families because reclamation was illegally sending so much water past Link River Dam without a water right to do so. In response, although the property was legally stored in Upper Klamath Lake Reservoir, Klamath Irrigation District was forced to limit growers' access to their property to ensure that at least some of the farmers would have and be able to receive water later this irrigation season. Commissioners, it is disheartening after 30 years of serving my country in the military and defending our nation from lawlessness to return home and find the law-abiding families that pay the storage facilities for the storage facilities for Upper Klamath Lake watch their property in abundance unlawfully flow to the ocean in violation of our Constitution I swore to uphold and defend. In April, I asked for help from our state officials and agencies to uphold the law when it became apparent stored water was going to be released without any identified water right. We asked Director Byler to simply perform his lawful duty. To date, I have observed no relief from the injustice and have been dismayed to see the agency being more responsive to concerns of Californians and out-of-state environmental groups who don't hold any water rights. That has been in Oregon farmers and ranchers and depriving them of their water rights. The department's posting of notice and sending out irrelevant surveys has not prevented over 160,000 acre-feet of stored water property from being taken from my family, my friends, and my community. Furthermore, the request for funding for investigations in late September through November is too little too late. The illegal release of water has already occurred, and Director Byler's staff has been provided all the information it needs to perform simple math and clearly, without any doubt, identify stored water was illegally released from the Upper Klamath Lake since our first complaints. For my foxhole, Director Byler's team has put more time and effort into drafting this memorandum for your review than any work in defending our rights or even reviewing the facts that they currently have in front of them. This department's inactions, delay tactics, and requests for extraneous funding further erodes the foundation of trust between the people and our government. Commissioners, I'll part with this. I pray for I pray for relief from the injustice. I pray for our leaders to uphold the law and return our trust. I pray this endeavor will not be further delayed by the department, resulting in any increased cost to our taxpayers nor our water right holders. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Souza. Do commissioners have questions? Bob, did you have a question? I just saw you were unmuted. I thought maybe, okay. All right. It looks like there are no questions from any commissioners. I thought we had one more commenter, but that person is asked to just speak during the regular public comment period at the end of the meeting. So that's what we'll do. Further questions for staff or discussion on this item? Don't see any hands going up or mutes coming off. So this is an action item. I'm looking for a motion to delegate authority to the department or to the director on this issue. Can we get a motion on the item at hand? Whether to delegate?
I move that we approve the action section 8, alternative 1 of this report.
Thank you, Joe. It's been moved to Delegate authority to the director to require users to pay in advance the estimated compensation and expense of the assistants involved in the distribution or division of water pursuant to ORS 540-210 as provided in OAR 690-250-0160 and in the proposed delegation order in attachment 2. Do we have a second?
I second the motion.
Thank you, Kathy. Let's go ahead and take a roll. Commissioner Corn,
No.
Commissioner Commissioner Baumgartner,
No.
Commissioner Mall,
Yes.
Commissioner Kihara,
Yes.
Commissioner Quimps,
Yes.
and yes from Commissioner Reeves. I think we have 4 in favor and 2 opposed. Is that right? Which I think means the motion carries. If you can get, Renee is shaking her head yes, so is Tom. Okay, the motion is, or the request is approved. So with that, we're going to take a 10-minute break. It is now 10:26. So, oh, we're a little bit early. Let's come back. Let's just come back at 10:35, which was the original, or what's the 10:45 is what's on the agenda. Can we move this up, do you think? Move up the reconvening time? Yeah. Let's just reconvene at 10:45, which was the original schedule. So if everybody wants to turn off video and mute themselves. All right. Looks like we are reassembled and ready for the next agenda item, which is agenda item E, Field Services Division activity. And for that, we have Ivan Gall presenting.
Hello again. For the record, this is Ivan Gall, Division Administrator for the Field Services Division. Chair Reeves and members of the commission, it's always a privilege to get together with you once a year and kind of showcase some of the activities that our Field Services Division staff are involved in across the state. In a normal year, of which 2020 is clearly not one, I'm typically accompanied by at least one water master, where they're allowed a half hour or so to showcase their water master district and give you a tour of it virtually sometimes in order to help you better understand some of the challenges they face and some of the neat water issues that they deal with on a daily basis out there. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I've got a brief PowerPoint presentation to share with you. I think this will go fairly quickly. Many of you have seen this format before, and I'll try and be brief with it, but leave time here to answer questions. Can everybody see the first slide there?
Yes, Ivan.
Okay. So for many years here in Oregon, our Field Services Division looked essentially like this. We've been broken up into 5 regions for a long time and 21 water master districts across the state. In late 2019, we began to do kind of a minor reorganization of the division in response to some recommendations from the Secretary of State's audit from several years ago, and in order to better balance our workloads between water master districts and prepare for some future workloads that we saw coming down the pipeline there. One water master district, District 19 here on the South Coast, was basically moved up here into the Willamette Valley, and I'll show you an updated map here in a minute. In order to balance the significant workloads between our water master, particularly here in the Salem office that was covering District 16. You can see this is a large geographic area between District 2 and District 16. The workload was fairly manageable on the South Coast, and we really needed help up here. So the decision was made to move that staff person up to Salem and distribute the workload through the main Willamette Valley into 3 water master districts instead of those 2. We also had a few administrative assistant positions that were combined and basically reworked into an assistant water master position that was put down in our Vail office in order to get ahead of the retirement of Ron Jacobs, our longtime water master for Malheur County down there. Ron retired late in the spring of this year. We also did some minor boundary adjustments, the most significant of which was moving some of the District 12 northern boundary into the water master's office and the region office in the Bend office there. So I'll show you kind of the reworked system. The removal of the water master position from the South Coast is being picked up by a combination of our Roseburg office and our Grants Pass office. Scott Cicilline and Ryan Carr, our 2 staff in Grants Pass, are taking on the water related issues in Curry County, and Susan Douthit and her county assistant Mary are working on the water issues there in Coos County as well. You can see the Willamette Basin now has been divided up into District 16 and 22 are splitting the northern half of the basin there, and then District 2 out of Eugene is handling the southern part of the basin. So we have now 2 water masters in Salem for the first time that are covering this central part of the Willamette Valley there. The actual numbers here for the basin or the state, excuse me. These numbers are captured by our field activities database. This is a database that came online in 2018. We're still struggling a little bit with timely data entry and accurate data entry. So we still have a few gaps in here. But overall, they're doing a good job of capturing the bulk of the work that our field staff are doing out there. We count the number of regulatory actions. And so a regulatory action is an action by staff that causes a change in water use behavior. These may involve going to head gates and turning down the amount of water diverted. It may be regulating off junior users in order to protect senior rights. For 2019, we had 4,891 total regulatory actions. Of those, a little under half of those were enforcing out-of-stream consumptive use rights or were for illegal use and occurred over 126 streams across the state. A little over half of those regulatory actions were protecting in-stream water rights that covered 180 in-stream water rights throughout the state. In addition to the actual regulatory actions, staff came back with over 13,000 different compliance checks. So a compliance check would be checking on one water right that you've done a regulatory action on and making sure that that person is still in compliance with that action. We also issued 21 notices of violation during 2019. So a notice of violation is kind of the second step, if you will, of a regulation process. Our water masters will first try and gain voluntary compliance. They may post a point of diversion to regulate off illegal water use or illegal water use. If we find non-compliance, staff will issue a notice of violation that sets a date certain for compliance to be obtained and lets people know what law they're in violation of, and also lets them know that if they continue to violate, they may be subject to civil penalties. In 2018, you can see we only issued 10 notices of violation. 2019, we more than doubled that. A lot of those were in response to the hemp and cannabis industries in Southwest Oregon, where we were finding a significant use of exempt wells, and folks didn't have groundwater rights. So NOVs or notices of violation were issued to those individuals. Where did these actions occur? So here's a map of the state. These are various groundwater complaints that were submitted and investigated during 2019. You can see the bulk of those are in Western Oregon. There's a few of them missing in Harney County because of some data entry errors there. We're working to fix those. But there's a significant number in the Willamette Valley and then down in Jackson and Josephine County. These are complaints largely alleging illegal uses, or in some cases, well interference from groundwater use from typically exempt wells. This is a location map of individual streams that were regulated for consumptive or other uses, including illegal uses in 2019. The dots don't represent individual regulatory actions. What they do represent are individual streams that were regulated. So staff in the database are tracking which stream that they're working on. One of these dots may represent a number of regulatory actions on that particular stream system. But again, you get a good understanding of the distribution of these streams across the state and where staff are doing the work. This is a location of the 180 or so in-stream water rights that were regulated for and protected during 2019. Again, the bulk of them lie here in Western Oregon and then through the Klamath and Deschutes Basin there. Well inspections are another important aspect of work that field staff perform. We have one well inspector per region now, so a total of 5 well inspectors out across the state. Here are the data from 2019. We had submitted to the agency during that calendar year a little over 1,000 monitoring well reports. So these are for monitoring wells that were installed. Over 3,600 water supply well reports. 6,200 geotechnical hole reports for geotechnical borings that were out there. Of the water supply wells, 3,085 were for new wells out there. Of the both monitoring wells and water wells, staff had 988 inspections. You can see that involved an inspection rate, or resulted in an inspection rate of about 29% of the new water wells that were drilled and about 14% of the new monitoring wells that were drilled. Field staff, along with staff in our groundwater section, measure a number of wells in Oregon to track groundwater level changes. This is very important for a number of reasons, looking at the capacity of the resource, how has allocation of groundwater impacted that. Here you can see the distribution of wells across the state that were measured during 2019. The triangles represent state observation wells. So these are formal wells that are part of a key performance measure that the department reports on every year. For 2019, I think we had about 384 wells enrolled in our state observation well system. The gold color represents wells that were measured by field staff, so part of the field services division. The blue represents wells that were measured by groundwater section staff that are out there. The round circles are other observation wells, of which there's over 1,200 across the state. Again, gold represents wells measured by the field, blue by the groundwater section. Of these wells in total, there's about 140 of them that are equipped with data loggers and sensors that are continuously measuring the groundwater level at those locations. So we get some high resolution data from key wells around the state. Field staff also are very involved in dam safety inspections. There's 946 statutory dams here in Oregon. A statutory dam is a dam that's more than 10 feet high and that stores more than 9.2 acre feet of water. Of those 946 in 2019, 57 of the high hazard dams were inspected. High hazard dams are typically inspected by Keith Mills, our dam safety engineer, and his staff. And then the field contributed to the inspection of 34 significant hazard and 72 low hazard dams across the state during the 2019 calendar year. These are the locations of those same statutory dams scattered across the state. You can see the large number of them clustered here in the Willamette Valley. That was one of the reasons we did the division reorg, was to break up that dam safety workload here in the Willamette amongst more staff. The large dots are the high hazard dams, the intermediate sizes and colors there, the significant hazard, and then the smaller lighter colored dots represent all the low hazard dams that are scattered around the state. And with that, I'll be happy to take any questions you may have. I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Do we have any questions for Ivan?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yes,
I was
please.
just curious about where do you think the dam inspection is going with the impending budget crisis that the department's in? Are you going to be able to maintain that level of inspection, or is that going to lag too?
Chair Reeves, members of the commission, it's a great question. In order to help balance things this biennium, our division, as well as other divisions in the agency, have essentially stopped filling positions that are vacant. So we're already seeing a decline in available staff to conduct this work. And so the amount of work that's going to get done on a statewide basis is going to decrease. We just won't have that same capacity that's available there.
Thank you. It seems that should be a priority some way, especially on the high hazard issues. I understand the situation that the state's in, but boy, if you ever have a failure, that's catastrophic for the area.
Chair Reeves, members of the commission, I agree, Commissioner Korn. High hazards are key. And again, Keith Mills and his staff, Tony and Arden here in Salem, are largely responsible for the inspections of the high hazard dams. Sometimes field staff will accompany them for training and to get the experience, but Keith and his staff largely handle that. And so far, they haven't seen any reductions in their staffing.
Any other questions for Ivan? Sounds like not. Ivan, thank you for that information. And
You're welcome. Thank you.
yeah. Our next item is allocation of funds between the 2020 and 2021 funding cycles of water project grants and loans. And Becky Williams is presenting. Hi, Becky.
Hello. Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me? And is everything working right?
It seems to be. Yes.
Excellent. That's what we want to hear. Well, good morning, Chair Reeves, members of the commission. For the record, I'm Becky Williams, Grant Program Coordinator here at the department. And today, let me start sharing this screen for you. Today, I'm speaking to you about the need and the question of allocation of funding 2020 and 2021 funding cycles for water project grants and loans. In this discussion today, we're going to talk about the funding that's available in our current situation. I'm going to walk you through some key factors to think about and that we've considered. We're going to talk about and review some options and their analysis of those options. And then the department will ask the commission to make a decision in allocating the available funds between 2020 and 2021. So as we get started, just a quick review of the Water Resources Development Program. We have the 3 funding opportunities and ways in which we support water users with place-based planning, feasibility study grants, and water project grants and loans. As you might remember, water project grants and loans funds and implementation of and supports water resource projects having economic, environmental, and community benefits. These funds are placed in the Water Supply Development Account for the purposes of providing funding support for those in-stream and out-of-stream water development projects. For the history of this funding opportunity, it began in 2016. And so we have had 4 complete funding cycles thus far, issuing a total of 25 grants and a total funding award of just under $24 million distributed between those 4 years. So currently available for the water project grant and loan funding is we have approximately $8 million. In the 2019 legislative session, an additional $15 million was authorized. The source of this funding was to be in the lottery revenue bonds that were sold, and schedule for that sale was to be spring of 2021. Well, here we are. 2020, I think, as I've been mentioned, is a different year. And we are in the middle of a pandemic, and as it has affected so many aspects of our lives, it has also impacted the funding for the water project grants and loans. Specifically to the impacts of the coronavirus pandemic on the grant offerings is that right away, we realized that our applicants were dealing with an ever-changing and dynamic situation. So we extended the application deadline for 2020 by 1 month to provide them some additional time to collect themselves, finalize their budgets and their preparation before submitting their applications. As we all know, in the early stages, lottery revenues decreased with the closure of many of those facilities where lotteries were accessed. This led to Department of Administrative Services indicating to us that the sale of the authorized lottery revenue bonds in 2021 in the amount of $15 million would not occur. This leaves us with the currently available $8 million for the next 2 funding cycles. This year, which we are in the middle of right now, 2020 and 2021. I think it's important to acknowledge as we come before you and ask for a decision on this is that it is a challenging moment, and these are certainly not the sorts of conversations that we wish we were having, but nonetheless, we are here and we need to present this information to you for a decision. And that decision is, with that $8 million that we currently have available, how do we allocate those funds between 2020 and 2021? In this analysis and evaluation, there's a tension, and there's a need to balance what we know is in our available funds and key considerations or other factors to think about as we make this decision. Some priorities we might offer is that if we're going to support projects, we want to see them be successful. And so part of that project success is providing the funding applicants need as they are grantees to implement their projects, which result in the greatest public benefit. Additionally, the department's goal is to promote responsible water management by providing funding for those projects that meet in-stream and out-of-stream water needs and produce those public benefits. Some other key considerations to think about. The statute directs the Commission to consider funding projects of diverse sizes, types, and geographic locations. We also know that many folks take time to plan these projects, and the reliability of annual funding cycles supports the continuity of those in progress project planning efforts. You might recall that we completed recently an assessment of our funding opportunity. And in that effort, we engaged with former and current grantees to hear their perspectives and feedback on the funding opportunities. One of the items that they expressed was a high value on clear communication and communicating expectations as they plan the project timelines and their budgets. In this economy, and as always, we know that funding shovel-ready projects gets money out the door, supports communities, and especially that is important during a current economic crisis. For this funding cycle in 2020, we have found that in review of the applications that the majority of those 2020 applications have already secured all of their match funding. Another key piece to consider as we ask you to think about these decisions is an overview of the 2020 applications. We see here we've received 12 complete applications requesting nearly $19 million. The breakdown of the funds requested is indicated on this graph here, where we have 3 applicants who have requested under $500,000, and then 4 requesting between $1 and $2 million in funding, and 5 applicants requesting between $2 and $3 million in funding. Some of the details on those applications and the status of match funds that they are required to obtain is, again, as I said, the majority of the applications, 7 of the 12, have all their match secured. 3 out of the 12 applications have secured a majority of the matching funds needed, and 2 indicate that the majority of their match funds are pending between late 2020 and 2021. Now, I've shared quite a bit of information with you all to this point, and I want to check in before we proceed to talk about some of the options to see if there are any questions related to those maybe key considerations or the situation in which we find ourselves. Chair Reeves.
I'm just checking to see if any of the other commissioners have questions at this point. I do not see any unmuting happening. I think we're good for now. Continue.
Thank you, Chair Reeves. As I said, we've thought about this quite a bit. We have some options for the Commission to consider. As we looked at our situation, we looked at many different options. We considered all those factors and topics that I just presented to you. We examined the statute and rule. We thought about the funding purpose and the needs of the projects. And so with that, we've winnowed down to a select set of 4 options to consider for today's decision. In that consideration, a few different concepts arose. One was the question of dividing the funds between 2020 and 21. And then also we entertained the notion of placing a maximum on the grant award. So these options are factored into option 1 you will see here. Option 1 before us is to divide the available funds between the 2020 and 2021 funding cycles. For 2020, having no maximum award, fully fund any of the projects to the extent of the allocation for 2020. But for 2021, setting a maximum grant award, we're suggesting an option to consider is $500,000 per grant. We're recommending this as an option to consider. As we think about this option, we feel it supports both project success and department goals. Part of that reason is for the 2020 applicants, it promotes project success. They have secured their match funding and applied and designed their project budgets and timelines with no maximum in mind. We feel that dividing the available funding achieves reliability and continuity of an annual funding cycle for that pipeline of project planning efforts. For the 2021 applicants, it would provide an early notice that there is a maximum grant award so that they could factor that into their project planning, timelines, budgets, and need to secure additional match funds. It would distribute funds to more projects, spreading the money. It might achieve diversity in size, type, and geographic locations of projects being awarded funding. However, it may delay some shovel-ready projects. Option 2 is to simply divide the available funds between the 2020 and 2021 funding cycles without instituting a maximum award in either year. This option is also recommended for consideration. Our analysis of this is it does support project success and the department goal. It promotes project success for the 2020 applicants, as again, they've secured their match funding. It achieves reliability and continuity, again, of the annual nature of the funding cycle for those projects currently in the pipeline of planning. However, it does not promote a wider distribution of those funds throughout projects. It does not promote diversity in size, type, and geographic locations. And again, it may delay shovel-ready projects. Option 3 before us is to take the $8 million and divide the available funds between the 2020 and 2021 funding cycles. And for both cycles, set a maximum grant award. Again, a suggestion or option might be a $500,000 maximum. At this time, the department does not recommend this option. We feel that it does not promote project success. For the 2020 applicants, it changes course mid-cycle. They have submitted their applications, they've designed their project budgets, and for most, secured their match funding. This places project completion and funding at risk, as they may have a difficult time seeking and securing additional match funds in this challenging economic time. Division of the funds does achieve continuity again of the annual funding cycles and therefore distributes funds throughout both years. It might achieve diversity in size, type, and geographic locations, again, placing that cap on those grant awards. It also might cause project delays. Option 4 is to fully fund all the recommended projects in 2020 up to the amount available that we currently have in the water supply development account. Hold the 2021 cycle only if there are remaining funds left. Again, this option is not recommended. We feel that it promotes project success for the 2020 applicants, but may not or does not support the department goal. It disrupts the reliability and continuity of annual funding cycles. It does not promote wider distribution of those funds or diversity in size, type, and geographic locations. It does support projects in the near term, but perhaps not in the long term. So recap of these options. Option 1, to divide the available funds between the 2020 and 2021 funding cycles, setting a maximum award on the 2021 cycle only, fully funding the recommended projects up to the amount allocated for 2020. This is the department's preferred option. Option 2, to divide the available funds between the 2020 and 2021 funding cycles and place no maximum award in either year. With that, the alternatives are before the commission, and the commission may consider the following alternatives. Adopt the recommended funding allocation between 2020 and 2021 funding cycles of water project grant and loan as described in section 5 of the staff report, or adopt a modified funding allocation. With that, the department's recommendation is to choose alternative 1, to adopt the recommended funding allocation in section 5 of the staff report, which is option 1. At this time, I will stop sharing my screen and I'd be happy to take questions.
Questions for Becky?
Chair Reeves,
Yes, Commissioner Corr.
I was just looking at the projects proposed for 2020. Are those placed in order of priority or just randomly? It's the attachment. Let me see here. Yeah, attachment 1.
Yes, great. Thank you so much, Chair Reeves, Commissioner Corn. Those projects are listed in order of funding requested.
Requested our priority of merit.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a list of priority of merit of how you would do it yet, or is it too early for that?
Chair Reeves, Commissioner Corn, at this time we have not issued or established that priority list.
Thank you.
Do you have other questions?
I have one. We say, funding allocated for 2020. Do we have funding allocated strictly for 2020? Or are we talking about the full 8 million? I couldn't see any discussion in here of the dollar amount that we'd be splitting.
Chair Reeves, Commissioner Kahara, we are talking about the approximately $8 million and the decision of how to split or divide those funds between 2020 and 2021.
Okay, so we would fund the top 5, once the ranking and all that stuff happens, up to 8 million, or are we talking somewhat less than that?
4 million.
Chair Reeves, Commissioners. We did not propose a specific way to divide those funds. They could be divided in half for each funding cycle respectively, or they could be divided such that however the funding recommendations come out when that evaluation is made. In other words, if it was a bit less than 50% of the $8 million or slightly greater, but not to use the entirety of the $8 million for only 2020.
Okay, so basically we're waiting until we get the ranking done to figure out basically how much we've got.
I would say we're waiting for the ranking to see what the total dollar amount of funds recommended is, and then that exact division of funds between the two cycles. So the question for today is, does the Commission opt for dividing those available funds between the 2 years, or if the entirety of funds were requested and recommended this year, would the Commission want all of the funds to be directed for this year? And so that option one, the department is recommending dividing the funds, but in order to distribute them to hopefully a wider population of projects in 2021, since our funding is limited, to place a grant cap or maximum amount for 2021. I hope that answers your question.
Tom, oh, excuse me. Tom, did you want to jump in here?
Yeah,
Sorry, Becky.
Want to maybe summarize what Becky's saying. The way we've approached it in the staff report is that we're not addressing the question of dividing. We're not asking you to address the question of dividing the funding under the scenario that we're recommending. And under that approach, what Becky is saying is that we think that it might be prudent to be informed by the priority list that will come out of the review process. If we do that, then we would likely bring some recommendations to you as in November when we have the question pending before you. So if you're comfortable with that, we could reserve that conversation for the November meeting when this action item will be in front of you. So it'll be not just decision about what grants to fund, but how to split the pot between the two grant cycles. Conversely, you could choose today to make a 50-50 split or whatever you would feel, however you feel would be appropriate. But that really is what it boils down to in terms of the question that Commissioner Kahara is asking.
Okay, yeah. That clarifies it a bit.
So I was confused by this description as well, and I'm not sure I still fully understand what would be involved in option one. It's possible it's just the way it's phrased, because it says that we would fully fund projects to the extent of funds allocated for 2020. And it sounds like we don't really know yet what funds are out. We're putting off to later date what funds are allocated to 2020. But am I right that are we aiming for something roughly 50-50 in 2020 or 2021, or could we end up theoretically distributing 90% of this in 2020 and having 10% left over for 21? I guess that's what I'm trying to get straight.
Chair Reeves, I think that's exactly right. We would generally, I think a general grant practice when you have a pot of funding that you need to spread out between 2 years, a reasonable practice would be to simply divide that, split it in half. Where perhaps that is certainly an option for the Commission. and you could so choose today. We are suggesting if the commission would like to indicate their desire to split the funds, to soften that just a little bit, in that, again, maybe the recommended projects in 2020 aren't exactly, maybe they're well under that 50-50 mark, or maybe they're just a scotch above that 50-50 mark. I think the important item here is also the concept of placing a cap on the 2021 funding cycle with option 1. The desire there is that if we have limited resources, we'd like to help as many folks out as possible.
Okay. So we're not, and we wouldn't be if we adopt this motion, we're not deciding, we're deciding that we will set a maximum, but we're not saying what it is at this point. If we adopt that option 1 for 21, I mean. Just want to make sure I understand what we're doing if we adopt this option.
What are we asking for?
Right.
We're suggesting that $500,000 would be a reasonable maximum award, and the commission could adopt that today. They could also make a different recommendation and direction to us.
Do any other commissioners have any thoughts or insights on this? Joe?
I have a question, and then I do have a lot of thoughts, but I just, in terms of process, after I ask my question, I assume we'll want to go ahead and take a motion and then discuss, if that makes sense. But anyway, begging my one question is, one thing you haven't talked about, and I'm curious if you've had conversations with any applicants to date, and then if you would be willing to go back and say, for example, yeah, we're going to fund, but it's possible we're not going to fund full amounts. And if you, for example, were faced with the prospect of being awarded 50 or 75% of what you've asked for, would you withdraw and wait for the next round?
Chair Reeves, Commissioner Moll, as you might remember, we do not engage with applicants during the application review process. And so if there was to be a maximum grant award limit placed on the 2020 applicants, you're exactly right. After those recommended projects were announced, we would then need to engage with them into a conversation to ask them essentially, does this funding maximum impact your project? How, and would you still accept the grant award? As I mentioned in the presentation, the applicants have all prepared their budgets, and the majority, 7 out of 12 in 2020, have their secured match lined up in accordance with their project proposal at this time. So beyond that, I can't speak to their interest level should that funding amount be reduced.
Thank you. And then follow up on that, mechanically, statutorily, rules, whatever. If, for example, someone asks for $500,000 and we determine that for whatever reason, we can't really award that much, and the concern is lost momentum. In other grant programs, for example, we've been faced with being asked to phase a project. And so mechanically, my question is, if someone asks for $500,000 and we say, you know, in this round, we're going to give you 50,000 so you can keep the momentum going, or you want you to come back again, would they have to, since there would be a formal grant, would they have to formally resubmit an entirely new package? Could they split the current application into a phase 1, phase 2? Mechanically, would that lead to a lot of extra hurdles in your mind?
Chair Reeves, Commissioner Moll, I think for the nature of these project and funding requests, they are implementation. And generally, if there is a phasing, it occurs separate from this funding request. It may have been a project phase that they already completed. And so this may be, say, phase 2, and then they might come back to us later for phase 3. But the applications before us are generally a specific project. And so to think of asking applicants to divide that or phase that, I see a great amount of hurdles for the department as well as for the applicants.
Thank you.
Any other questions, or can I get a motion on this agenda item?
Chair Reeves, can I interject before we make a motion just to clarify the record?
Mhm.
When you look at the staff report in table 2, which is the key to the motion that we have around recommending option 1, I want to clarify that there are 2 option 1s in that table, and that is an error. The first option 1 is indeed option 1. The second option 1, option
2.
And I just want to clarify for the record, should someone look at this down the line, there might create some confusion.
Okay, and I think it's also true that that option 1, well, I guess this would be true for option 1, that the option is clarified by the second paragraph under that table that talks about that the decision for how to divide the funds would be held until we have more information from the 2020 project applications.
Chair Reeves, that is our recommendation. You can do differently, of course, and but under that scenario, we would be bringing that recommendation to you as part of the November meeting, along with the actual decisions around grant awards.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so do we have a motion? Anybody ready for a motion? No motions.
I'd make a motion, but it's slightly different. I've given Tom's clarification. I would move that we approve option 2 and split it, but not put a cap on either year for maximum flexibility.
To clarify, Joe,
The second option 1.
the second option 1, but we wouldn't be establishing any amounts for either at this point. We would just be deciding to divide them.
That is correct.
Okay.
And with yes, that is correct. And then we can have discussion about what that might mean.
Okay. And do we have a second? I'll second. So.
Can I clarify for folks? I just want to make sure that we distinguish between the carving up the money into different grant cycles versus the caps within each of those grant cycles. Those are different issues.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And it sounds like what Joe's proposal is that we would be deciding that we want to divide the available funds. And we might do that once we have more information about the 2020 projects, but that we don't intend to establish a maximum in either year per award. That's the proposal. And so the way that differs from the department's recommendation is that the department's recommendation would have had us setting some cap for 2021.
Chair Reeves, if I could add a nuance to that you would still have the ability, if you wanted to revisit the question of placing a cap on the 2021 or 2021 cycle, but you wouldn't be doing that today. And so if what happens in November and further informs your thought process and you decide a cap would be good, you would have the ability to be able to inform that cycle at that time.
Chair Reeves, I would also offer that option 2 is a recommended option for consideration as well by the department.
I guess one question is how helpful it is to anybody to know now, rather than in November, whether there will be a maximum, either whether there will or there won't be a maximum. I'm sort of starting to think maybe we don't want to say whether there, either way at this point, whether there will or there won't, unless there's some reason why applicants need that information now.
Chair Reeves, I certainly am not in the shoes of the applicants. Many of these applicants work for years to develop their projects.
Right.
And so I would think that their projects, their budgets are constantly being informed by new information. We generally always post the updated application materials in January. So the commission meeting in November would precede that release of any announcement of materials and guidance. And so applicants would at least have time to be informed, and that decision would be incorporated into the materials that we release.
We have a request for comment on this item. So how about if we hear from, it's from April Snell from the Oregon Water Resources Congress. How about if we hear from her now, since we're having this conversation about the best way to manage this? She may have some input on that as well. April, are you ready to address us? There you are.
Yes.
Hello.
Chair Reeves, can you hear me? Okay, good.
Yes. Yeah.
Chair Reeves, members of the commission, staff, and YouTube onlookers. For the record, April Snell, Executive Director of the Oregon Water Resources Congress. We represent irrigation districts and similar entities around the state. The issue you have before you is not an easy one, and I don't have a straightforward recommendation for you, but I will at least share a few thoughts. And I think, or I anticipate that we both, specifically the folks that are on this meeting, but also water stakeholders as a whole, will be having much more discussion about funding of water resources agencies' budget, as well as water resources infrastructure projects. And the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and the economic impacts that we have at every level of government are not going to go away anytime soon. And it is something where the uncertainty as to when things will resume something resembling normalcy, even though I think that is a term that is out the window, that makes these types of decisions particularly difficult. So I wrestled with going into this meeting whether I should talk with some of my district folks who have projects that are in the current cycle, as well as have projects that they've been working on, as Ms. Williams alluded to, for years. And there are going to be funding needs in every year moving forward. And there's also some federal funding that still is in play, and we can anticipate being able to utilize at least in the next year or so, but that funding does require a state and local match in order for those projects to move forward. So what does that all mean for you guys? Well, you guys have often seen that there are a number of diverse projects that apply for funding every cycle, and there are always more projects and more funding needs than available resources. The loss of the lottery-backed bonds, the $15 million, was unexpected and is really a blow to everyone involved. And there were other water-funded projects that felt the budgetary axe on that. So moving forward, when you only have $8 million for both your current round of funding applications that you guys will make a decision on in November, as well as any potential funding for the future, that's a drop in the bucket. it is better than nothing. And I think the discussion you guys are having as far as, do you split it? How do you split it? Do you put a maximum award? There isn't a straightforward answer to that, but I would recommend that you give yourselves the flexibility that you do have as a commission in making funding decisions, to not lock yourself into a decision today that you may regret, say, next year. And by that, I mean, I would recommend not having a funding cap. There's just too much uncertainty. And I can't speak for my folks to know, and I would suspect some of them would say, yes, we can work with a 500K cap. Others, it really wouldn't work for them. And so I think that's a challenge just in meeting our needs generally. The unfortunate reality is, if we're looking for lottery-backed bonds and that revenue to come back, it's not just 21 that there's going to be a drought in that regard. It's 22 and possibly 23. And what does that mean to this program? What does that mean to districts and other broad stakeholders who are seeking funding? It means they're going to have to look for other sources of funding. And that's a cold reality that we can't escape in these discussions. And so I think some of the things that the staff report has accurately brought up is, and I would encourage you to evaluate when you're making the funding decisions, is what are the projects that are shovel ready and can go right now, and ensuring that those projects, especially in this current funding cycle, are allowed to move forward. For everyone else, I would encourage that the department let stakeholders and folks know that at the moment there's no new funding, and that is something that we can work on. And I am committed as not only a representative of irrigation districts, but as someone who's passionate about water personally, that we will advocate in the legislature to get more funding for this program and funding for water infrastructure projects in whatever manner we can find. Now, beyond that, there is a concern that I am hesitant to raise in a public forum, but I think it's important to note and important for the commissioners to think about. Funds are going to be looked at very closely in the next budget cycle. And by that, I mean any account that has funding left in it is potentially vulnerable to being reallocated for other purposes. It is a very divisive thing that happens in a legislative environment when there's a budget shortage, but it's something that one should look for and try and avoid at all costs. And I will say I would be very much opposed to such a thing occurring, but unless your funds are constitutionally protected, it's a risk to be wary of. And so, you know, I don't have a straightforward answer for you, but I think you have applications in front of you that will be presented to you after they've been scored and ranked in November. And the large portion of the funding you have arguably should go towards that project, provided that they pass that various scoring and ranking process. And for next year, I'm not sure if it makes sense to hold back a little bit of money from that or not. And I think I would encourage you again to give yourselves the flexibility to weigh that decision once you have all the available information about the funding applications in front of you. And then also hopefully having a better sense of what the agency's budget and what the 21 session is going to look at. We'll have additional revenue forecasts that will occur by that time, and that also could help with your guys' decision making. But it is something where it's this balance between holding money back so that you have it for future cycles, and on the flip side, being viewed that you aren't using every penny that you have. So with that, I took more time than I was anticipating, but it is a very difficult decision, and it is something I don't envy the decisions you have yet to come, but I again would encourage you to leave yourself with flexibility and perhaps think about some of the options that have been presented to you today and revisited at your November commission meeting. Thank you, and happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, April. Any questions for April? That was helpful. Thank you. So I guess I'd like to, April, address this a little bit. Joe, I wanted to hear your thinking, if you don't mind, more about why you were suggesting no maximum.
Unmute. April and I have not spoken, but a lot of the same reasons.
Same stuff. Mm-hmm.
I think that we've seen, you've seen longer, I've seen in the 2 years that I've been on the commission, the range of readiness, the range of vision, the range of flexibility. And you just never know. And I would hate, given these circumstances of uncertainty, for us to all of a sudden feel hamstrung when we had a portfolio of fantastic applications. Quite frankly, I think one of the scenarios we need to consider is fully spending $8 million this round, if they're that good. Even though it's splitting, well, we leave $5 or whatever it is. And I think we should always approach it that way. I know that you've heard me talk in the past about sort of the equity of the distribution of funds, not on a geographic basis, but this question of organizations or partnerships that are ready to apply. And I don't know if she sent it to others, but before she went on leave, I got this thing on Leadership 2020 from Kim, something that they produced to sort of get at some of this. And they were talking about the suggestion is that the department begin to use its direct service authority to help organizations that maybe don't have the firepower to put together good applications.
Oh, yeah.
When I think about all of the different flexibilities we want to have, and whether or not, as I suggested in my question to Becky, if someone's coming to us with a big project and it's good, but it's not quite there, but we can help them survive and keep momentum over the next year to two by providing a small portion of their grant and sort of force a phasing that might not be otherwise there. I mean, the problems that we as an applicant, for example, have with phasing is it's very cost ineffective. If you get everything together and get it all in one phase, it's much more cost effective. But sometimes, as we're faced now with other applications, it's just forced. There's just no way around it. If the department and the grant making authority can help ease that pain by keeping some capacity momentum, it allows for creativity and a little additional fundraising and all sorts of other stuff. So it's primarily that maximum flexibility that it gives us in our distribution role, that it gives department staff, that it's another way to entice a little more back and forth between department staff and applicants. It's simply that. Yeah, as I understand it, Tom, I'd like clarity from you actually. April's question about whether or not the obligated dollars in for this funding cycle could be taken back. I don't think that's the case with these as their lottery dollars, but could you clarify whether or not that's true?
Thank you, Chair Reeves, Commissioner Mall, Tom Byler for the record. Technically, that possibility exists. The legislature always has the ability to claw back dollars. And April is accurate that I think in a really tough budget environment like we're facing going forward, that sweeping of funds that are dedicated for other purposes may happen. That often happens with fee revenues, for example, where they may be dedicated to certain purposes and the payers of those fees are paying for services. Those dollars will get swept and reappropriated for other purposes. I think there's a question in my mind because these are kind of capital dollars. These are lottery bond revenues, which tend to be focused on project-specific type of construction types of activities, whether the legislature would have the authority to be able to shift those dollars to more general fund types of purposes is, I'm not sure they could do that. And if they can't, that maybe limits the desirability of sweeping those types of dollars, but it doesn't mean they couldn't, and it doesn't mean they won't try. I just don't know that the risk is as great as it might be with some other types of fund sources.
Well, it sounds, I mean, so what we have on the table is option 2, which would say divide the funds and without specifying the amounts, and that there would be no maximum award. That's the motion on the table. Do we have any, if we don't have any further, is there further discussion? Bob, did you have something?
Yes, I tried being high tech and raising my electronic hand.
Oh, I didn't notice it. I'm sorry.
But, and Becky, that was a very well done presentation, and thank you for that. I do think April raises a lot of questions, as does Commissioner Joe, and they're almost imponderable in some ways, at least for me, because it's uncertainty and there's a little bit of risk assessment. And the only one I wanted to, or thought I wanted to add to that is I'm trying to think about program continuity as well, to make sure that we continue to have a viable program. People continue to see us as a place to go to get these good projects. And so when I think about splitting and allocating of the funds, in some ways, one of the thought processes I go through is, where are we going to get the best projects and how do we maintain that program continuity? And that's what I think about. And when I looked at the putting a cap, although I'm comfortable with the cap, what I don't know is what that cap should be. As I look at these projects, 9 of the 12 that we have in front of us are over $1 million. So I would like to have us give some thought process if we're going to try to cap them. What is it that we're trying to achieve with that? And how does that help us make sure we fund the type of projects we have? And maybe that's just the suggestion that if we are going to put a cap, having more discussion would be appropriate in my mind before we decide what that cap is. Thank you, Chair Reeves. That's all I had.
Thank you, Bob. Eric, I just wanted to check in with you because we can't see you. See if you had anything to add here.
Thank you, Chair Reeves. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
I was thinking similar to Bob. You know, one thing that jumped out to me was that 3 of the projects in attachment 1 are below what is the proposed cap. And, you know, either way, we're going to have difficult decisions before us in the future, but I think maintaining the maximum flexibility, and then, you know, when we get to those decisions, looking at how much match funds do they have, what's the ratio of the request to the project cost, and, you know, are we selecting projects that only have a geographic diversity, but also, you know, people we're getting the most for our investment. You know, they're bringing in a lot of match dollars. So I was thinking similarly to Commissioner Baumgartner and that notion of the cap. And there's a comment in attachment 3, analysis of option 2. It says this option would not incentivize small project applications in 2021. I don't know that that's necessarily true. I think when we get to water infrastructure projects, they're by nature very expensive, and so most of them probably aren't going to be small requests. But I don't think, you know, it shouldn't discourage people from applying just because we don't have a $500,000 cap. So I like the idea of having the greater flexibility.
So no, not establishing a cap now.
Correct.
At least, yeah. Yeah, I also favor not deciding about a cap right now, I guess. Whether there will or will. I just think seeing what's on the table already, what's already in the pipeline and ready to go might help us clarify our thinking on this. And my only hesitation is that I'm assuming that, well, if there's something that would help applicants to know now that we ought to be considering, then, you know, I'm open to that. But I don't know whether action on a maximum right now is going to be that helpful as opposed to decision on whether there would be a maximum in November, for example, for the 2021 cycle. I think we're all, none of us are thinking, I don't think, that a cap in 20 makes sense. But anyway, so the motion on the table is to adopt option 2. Yeah, I think the option is it option 2? It's option 2 unmodified, right? No maximum award in either year. And are we ready for a vote on that?
Well, if you need a second, I will second it.
I think it was moved and seconded, but well.
No, it was moved, but it hadn't seconded. So.
Oh, okay. I thought I seconded it, but perhaps not.
Meg, you seconded it.
I did second it.
Okay.
Okay, but it's been seconded. So let's vote. Commissioner Kihara?
Yes.
Commissioner Quemps?
Yes.
Commissioner Baumgartner?
Yes.
Commissioner Mall?
Yes.
Commissioner Korn?
Yes.
Commissioner Reeves votes yes. The motion carries. Option 2. Thank you very much, Becky. That was a really well done presentation. Appreciate it.
Chair Reeves, if I
Yes.
could, I appreciate the discussion today. Very thoughtful, and there's no easy answer when you're dealing with scarcity of resources, whether it's water or money. I just want to add, Becky does a great job for us. We're grateful to have her leading these conversations. We do miss Kim, but I want to report out that Kim gave birth yesterday, I believe, to her first child, or a daughter named Vera Ruth, who I think was 9 pounds. We're very happy for her.
That's great. You pass on our high fives. Great.
How many pounds?
9 pounds, I believe, right around there.
Wow.
Oh,
Yeah. Her name is
9 pounds, 7 ounces, and 21 inches long.
My goodness.
And her name is Vera, V-E-R-A.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just
cool.
as a note, a side note, Kim's husband was a lineman for the Oregon Ducks, so that makes sense.
By way of explanation.
Yes.
Well, that's great. Congratulations to her. Okay, we have no requests for general public comment. We did have one, but that one was withdrawn. So I think we are adjourned. Thank you all of you, commissioners, staff, participants, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.